Is everybody ready here? Yeah, all good. Okay. Well, welcome to our village board meeting. It is January 13th at 7 o'clock. I'd ask the village clerk to please take the roll call.
Trustee Bachner.
Here.
Trustee Kargi.
Here.
Trustee Vasquez.
Here.
Trustee Brennan. Here. Trustee Hennick.
Here.
Trustee O'Connell.
Here.
President Aducey.
Here. I can ask you all to stand and take off your caps so we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okie dokie. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Most for deer, which is not unexpected. We do have two D200. So we'll call on you first, and then because the school board will be giving a presentation like right after, or would you like to do it right before? What, swearing in first?
Swearing in first, and then we also
Yeah.
have folks from the chamber here that want to speak on the consent agenda item too.
They need to should they?
Who's
Who's in?
Bob? Stella, tell him. Bob, do you want to? Who's going to speak to the chamber item tonight?
I'm here, Angela Cooper from Westfield Park Hospital here as well.
All right, I'll get her.
Okay. Okay, great, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, then I think you're right. Let's just do the swearing in, and then we'll go to D200. Then John and Steve, I'll ask you to come before that. All right, very good. So,
Chief.
where's the chief? There he is. Chief Bowman, if you could take the podium, please.
Good evening, Madam President and honored trustees of the Village of River Forest. I would like to present firefighter paramedic Jonathan Rouse for the position of firefighter paramedic. Firefighter Rouse was born in Chicago and raised in Oak Park. He's a graduate of the Oak Park Public School System and a member of the Oak Park River Forest High School class of 2009. His family are longtime members of the River Forest Tennis Club. Firefighter Rouse attended the University of Evansville and graduated with a BFA in theater performance in 2013. Firefighter Rouse made a career shift shortly after graduating college, graduating Loyola University's EMTB program in 2014. Firefighter Rouse was employed at Medical Express Ambulance Service for 4 years as both an EMTB and paramedic. Firefighter Rouse graduated from Malcolm X College's paramedic program where he received both an ACLS and ITLS certification in 2017. After graduation, Firefighter Rouse began looking for opportunities to enhance his 911 emergency response experience, which led him to taking a position as a contract paramedic for the Wheaton Fire Department, a position he held until being hired by the River Forest Fire Department. Firefighter Rouse graduated from the Romeoville Fire Academy on December 13th of last year. Firefighter Rouse is supported by his family, his parents Steve and Janet, who are right there, his younger sister Jenna, and his wife Lindsay, who he was lucky enough to marry on October 5th of 2019. Firefighter Rouse is incredibly excited and honored to have been chosen to serve on the RFFD and serve the community that helped to raise him. If we could have the village clerk come up and give the oath of office.
Raise your right hand. I, Jonathan Rouse,
I, Jonathan Rouse,
having been appointed to the office of firefighter paramedic
having been appointed to the office of firefighter paramedic
in the Village of River
in
Forest,
the Village of River Forest,
in the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of firefighter paramedic to the best of my ability.
the duties of the office of firefighter paramedic to the best of my ability.
Yeah, congratulations. So I'm gonna sign here.
And you're going to set it right there.
Yes. Take a picture. Yes, absolutely. If the parents want to come up and take a picture, please do so. Yeah, this is the time. Yay is right. Enjoy it. He deserved it. There you go. And then we'll get a picture of the parents. Bill, Sarah. There you go. Aw. Yeah. No, Chief, you got to get him one. Yeah. There you go. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Very nice.
Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Great. All right. Probably putting out a fire wouldn't be as nervous-wracking. All right. Very good. Congratulations to the family as well. I see them walking out the door. So
We get the tour.
okay. All right. Well, enjoy. Okay. That was exciting. All right. Okay. Moving on now. We do have a presentation from the school district, T200. We have a few representatives. Superintendent Pruitt Adams is here with us. So maybe before that, John, I want to make sure I get it. John and Steve, do you want to talk prior or after? It's up to you. Okay. Very good. And yes, and by the way, I will say that. Thank you.
There we go.
Is it on that one?
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For-
And before you
and-
get started, though, Jolene, we'd like to, on behalf of the village board and all the residents here in River Forest, congratulate you on
Thank
being
you.
Villager of the Year. That
Thank
was
you
great.
very much. Thank you. I found out that I have the distinct honor of following Mr. John Phelan, who in 2014 was the Villager of the Year for Oak Park and River Forest. So
Yeah,
I'm
there you
glad
go.
to
Yeah,
be in your
John.
circle. Thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for inviting us tonight. It is a pleasure, and we welcome the opportunity to come at another point in time as well. Joining me tonight is Mr. Greg Johnson, the Associate Superintendent for the school district. Also, Dr. LaVar Ammons, who is our Executive Director of Equity and Student Success, and Dr. Lori Fiorenza, who is our Director of Student Learning. And our understanding tonight is to give you an update on the strategic plan and how that encapsulates the curriculum rewrite and the equity initiative. So, click. I don't have to tell you in the room that for us, the work is about our future. The work is about our most treasured commodity, our students. And so ensuring that all of our students, regardless of race, color, socioeconomic status, gender identity, that all of our students receive the best education that we have to offer. So in order to start this presentation, I want to tell you that at the core of our strategic plan and our theme for this year is equity and excellence through access for all. And so all of the work that we're doing when I share with you the strategic plan comes back to that common statement. What I passed out to you was the strategic plan. On that, he's supposed to be clicking for me. On the document that I passed out, and we had some on the table, it shows you those things that we accomplished last year as a part of our focus for 18-19, and it also tells you our focus for 19-20. In the year of 2017-18, we pulled up the strategic plan and did a rewrite of what was already there and wanted to move out the calendar. Every year we report out routinely to the board every quarter on where we are. A core group of stakeholders, which consists of staff members, community members, and students. We sit down every year and look at what we've accomplished and what will be our focus for the next year. So as you look at this and you look at our chart, I was asked, so how are you functioning without the role of a building principal? One of the things we realized when we first did the strategic plan, that at first it was a document sitting on a shelf. No one knew what it was. No one was implementing it. And so the first year, it became the charge of the executive cabinet, which is myself, assistant superintendent for human resources, the associate superintendent for curriculum and instruction, buildings and facilities, finance, and communication. The bulk of the work fell on us, along with a small core group of people to implement. The following year, we pushed out even more with more teacher voice and implementation. With the rewrite this year, we took the 6 components that were initially the strategic plan and we collapsed them. When our building principal decided to resign, we took the opportunity then to really look at how could we take our strategic plan and really make it a part of what we do every single day for every single person in that building versus a couple of people doing the work. And so we made Greg Johnson the associate superintendent. He is responsible for the transformative education piece. Transformative education now takes teaching and learning, which is the instructional piece, the day-to-day and what's happening in the classroom. It also took on the piece of holistic community education, which before was how we onboard our students when they come to us from District 90 and District 97, and how we prepare them for life after Oak Park and River Forest, whether it is college or career. And so that's the holistic community education piece. The other piece it also picked up was the supportive student learning environment. And that, that piece entails social emotional development, where we are with regards to mindfulness, where we are with regards to how our students are feeling, how they are feeling welcome, safe, and secure within our building. We then took what was traditionally transformative leadership, and that's our hiring practices, and that became our second priority. We then took what had initially been finance, communications, and buildings and made that one. And so that's one component. Well, if you look at the core of it, initially equity was goal 2. And we realized that if we really are focused on equity, equity had to be embedded in every single thing we do. And so priority 1 is our equity goal. And so when you look at the chart, equity actually is the dotted line around there. It's a little cut off because every decision we make is tied to equity. When we get into the strategic plan, the people who follow me, Mr. Johnson will speak to you on the transformative teaching piece, and that's the curriculum piece. If you look in the document, that is listed as priority 2. When Dr. LeVar Ammons comes up, he's going to talk about how we have taken the policy, the racial equity policy that the district approved last year, and how we are using that in developing our procedures so that all of our decisions go through a racial equity lens that will entail how we make decisions. Also in that, he will hit on instruction. He will hit on transformative leadership, which is our hiring practices. He will hit on the financial aspects. And so I'm saying that to say that when you hear that piece, it will show how every single component of our strategic plan is aligned to everything we do every day and built into the work that we do. It is our hope that under that piece that it will become more entrenched. So I said that to say that each individual on the building team and the district team has a key component that they are responsible for. As the superintendent, I'm responsible for implementation of the entire strategic plan and monitoring that, developing the metrics and reporting back to the board. Mr. Johnson, in his role as associate superintendent, has the director of student services and the director of teaching and learning fall under him. That's for that holistic piece we talked about, and that's for that teaching and learning piece we talked about. And then also the director of student support, who has that holistic piece, that supportive learning environment. The assistant superintendent for human resources is responsible for hiring. One of our goals is to, by 2024, have at least 50% of our entire staff be reflective of our student demographic. And so that's tied to our hiring. That's also tied to how, when people leave, we do the exit interviews. Following that is Mike Carriosho, Karen Sullivan, and Cindy Sador. Cindy Sador is our Chief Financial Officer. Mike Carriosho is our Chief Operation Officer. And Karen Sullivan is our Executive Director of Communications. And so that is our infrastructure as it relates to facilities. And the Project One that's coming on board, we're going to break ground in June of 2020. That also includes the decisions that we make and how we are deciding on how to spend money. Where Dr. Amos comes in, it is his job. That's the wrong slide. I know he's giving me a signal. Dr. Amos' job is to make sure that when we are making all of these decisions, that we run it through a racial equity lens. Okay, right. Next slide. Recently, I did a State of the District update to the board on where we are with the Illinois State Report Card. Our summative designation for this year is 81.2. In order to be exemplary, we need 85.42. And so while we are there, we did share with the board that our data over the last 10 or more years has flatlined. While we exceed the state, we have still flatlined. And so the work that we are doing under Transformative Education is to support, to move us forward and bring our test scores up. You can see the State of the District address on our website. Okay. Is that my last slide?
I think so.
Okay. Now I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and then I'll come back at the end to kind of show how it all comes in.
All right. Well, I'm going to thank you again for having us out here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Fiorenza is going to be coming up here and help me with some of the information here. I want to just very quickly here in a few minutes talk about one of the key initiatives that we have working on in the school a little bit more thoroughly. And so this is my third year in the district. And in my first year, it became apparent that one of the challenges for us moving forward was to implement a comprehensive curriculum evaluation process. It was needed. And there were a lot of little kind of informal indicators that we were able to pull on to say, yeah, this is someplace that we need to go as an institution. And so we started that during last school year. We started on a freshman-specific curriculum evaluation process with the idea that we want to focus on the entire freshman experience to help students kind of transition to high school and then move and throughout high school after that ninth grade year. And so throughout that process, what we found last year as we did that is three kind of significant themes. There's more thorough information about all of this on our district website. I invite you all to go take a look at it if you haven't seen it already. But I do want to highlight a few things that we really came to understand. Number one, we do have a significant number of students whose achievement scores and academic performance suggest future success in honors coursework, who aren't currently in that honors coursework. And what I mean by that is I want to draw a distinction between achievement scores and academic performance. Achievement scores are the types of things, of course, that you're going to see on standardized tests. Right now in the state of Illinois, it is the SAT. But of course, we see that information. We see those scores projected from their 8th grade scores when they first come into the high school to the 9th grade PSAT, 10th grade PSAT, and so on. And so we have a lot of students who are scoring in a strong range on these tests, and who are doing incredibly well in their academic courses as far as A's and B's, doing the thing of school, right? Doing their homework, studying, and getting their work done. So we're really happy to see that. But systemically, what we see are a large number of these students are not enrolling in our honors courses. We have about 50% of our student population in our honors courses when they come into the freshman year. 50% of our population is in our honors courses. We're looking at this, we see somewhere in the area of about 30 to 35% in addition to that of our overall population every year has scores that are well within this range to be successful in our honors courses. But for whatever systemic reasons exist, whatever socialized reasons exist, simply not consistently rolling in our honors classes freshman year. This is a challenge for us. We had to take this seriously. The second thing we saw is that we have definite inconsistencies between sections of the same course. This shouldn't be too much of a surprise, right? If you've had students in the school, or I have a freshman and a junior in the school, I've seen this, and a lot of high schools can speak to the same thing. But we did see that these inconsistencies are playing out in some cases very, very different ways, right? So the volume of homework, the types of assessments, in some cases, the actual texts, the actual way the curriculum is experienced, different between sections. We wanted to shore that up for a higher level of consistency, so that was just equal and more equitable for all of our students. And the second thing that we saw is that, and we got this from a lot of student focus groups that we ran, the transition to freshman year can be very overwhelming. And students specifically told us, and parents have told us this school year and in previous school years consistently, this is true specifically in writing expectations and in math expectations. That's what the students are telling us. When they come over to the high school and they experience a high school math curriculum for the first time, whoa, it's hitting them, all right? Particularly if they're in those honors classes. They're coming in for the writing expectations in that freshman year. Boom, it's hitting them. All right, they're feeling kind of a wake-up call. That's the feedback we're getting, and so these are things that we really wanted to make sure that we addressed, and kind of linked into that. Every year that I've been at the high school now, I've had parents call me, sometimes in small groups, sometimes individually, and say, look, the homework load for freshmen when they first come in can be overbearing. All right, overbearing. And so this is something that we want to take a look at and make sure that the quality of work that we're giving our students is exactly what we want. The quantity and the quality are what we want. So we're going to talk about how we address some of those things, and I'll turn it over to you.
So with all of those things in mind and my start in July of 2019, we looked at the curriculum in the core content areas to really shore up three main things: ensuring that we have reviewed, reflected, refined our priority standards. Second, we really want to make sure we know the things that we want kids to know. What are the skills and the content we want them to know, so that as we design our benchmark assessments, we are determining whether or not kids are mastering not just content, but a skill set. Are they able to do they know what we want them to know? As you see, there are three things that we really want to focus on this year as we continue to move forward, and that is to really ensure that the content is relevant to our students. It doesn't matter how much I give them. If they can't connect to it, if it doesn't mean anything, our research shows that the learning decreases. Kids don't learn when they can't connect to it. So we're really working on that. We are reviewing our digital literacy and our writing processes. So students in that survey and the focus group identified that they did not feel prepared or as prepared in some cases for college level writing. And so we have an obligation to respond to that and to shore up our writing processes to ensure kids are ready for collegiate or post-secondary, whatever path they choose, writing. And finally, the science sequence, and we are continuing to work on that to determine what's the appropriate path for students relative to science. As we work through that, our goal is to begin the school year next year with pilots of this. So every teacher that teaches a freshman class will have the opportunity, if they have sat on this writing curriculum. So that is not every single freshman teacher. It will be just a select group that have spent time writing and reflecting on the standards and the skills and worked through the assessments. And so they will pilot one unit. And so for non-educators, one unit could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, It's just one small segment, and then they will have an assessment. We will take that information and that data, and we will reflect on it with the teachers that aren't piloting as well, to really look at, did we meet the mark? Did we stretch kids? Did they grow? Do they feel like it's more relevant? Do they know what we want them to know?
Before I transition on to this next slide, I do also want to say that we would be remiss if we didn't recognize, of course, that we have an incredibly strong tradition of really high performance at OPRF, and we need to hold on to this. Yeah. All right, this is quite important. That's why when we're talking about showing up the strengths on the right hand side, we are talking about identifying those things that are making our high level curriculum really function well for our students, making sure we understand exactly what those things are, holding on to them. Right, and making sure then, of course, that we're building on those and more consistent with them as we move forward, so that all students, a much wider selection of students, can access them. I want to talk a little bit about this now, where we are moving in 2021 through 2022, and we're going to kind of trade off some of these bullets here. The first one is this. All right, our plan moving forward is based off of that population that I was talking about before, to identify, all right, about 30 to 35% that's not currently enrolled in our honors classes of our overall population. Say, look, all right, your test scores, your academic track record is telling us that you can access this content. Our plan is to enroll 80 to 85% of our population in one high rigor freshman course in English, history, science, and world languages. Okay, that's step one of the process.
So the next thing we really needed to focus on is the support structure that's in place throughout the entire school, and that it is systematized to ensure that students are well supported. Often when you think about support structures, you think about students who struggle with learning, and you can actually get stuck there. So support structures are supposed to be for any student. Right? Sometimes if you come to the school and you look at the tutoring center, which we have students have access to all day long, there is a table where you will find 6, 7, 8 kids at a time that are in Calc AB, that are in extended math classes, and they too find themselves needing support and needing assistance. And so really looking at what is that support system throughout the building and how is it systematized, so that we are not just reacting when students are struggling, but we are proactively thinking and have supports in place to assist students when they struggle. So we are looking at not just waiting for them to struggle, but putting in supports and interventions well in advance, so that students can actually, I spoke to a group of students today that they could have a manual of sorts that says, you know, if I need this, where could I possibly go? So there might be a writing lab. Right? Writing is a process that is intense. And so is there a writing lab? Is there a space and a place I could go? Someone could proof my college letter, not just my counselor. Yeah. And so we are looking at all of those options and looking at how to systematize that to ensure that every student has access to all they need to be as successful as possible.
All right, so 88 to 85% of our population is in one high-level rigorous class. We have support structures in place. We're happy with those. Those are moving along. Now, wait a second here. All right, if you have students who haven't had access to this rigor, how do you know that they're going to be able to be truly successful in this class, right? I mean, this is high-level work. We have that strong record of success. Well, that's the third bullet that we see here. The idea is that in order to get that honors credit, it's not automatically there. There's a path for differentiation, so that the idea is I can be in this class, all right, and if I'm having struggle with the highest level context of this class, that's okay. That's okay. Honors credit is earned based off of the quality of work in the class, accessing that rigor at those highest levels, not just a function of, hey, I find myself sitting in this class, and as a result, I'm going to get honors credit. It's the idea that I'm in this class, this content's there, I'm going to move through it, and let's see how I do. And the honors credit will be earned as a result of the quality of the work, not just simply where the students find themselves sitting. And if it's you don't hit that mark, that's okay. You're still part of this environment where this high-level learning is around you. So the peer effect and exposure to this rich content is the goal for a much broader population of our students.
So the final piece is to engage in deep professional learning. And I would just like to say again that as I work with the staff at Oak Park River Forest High School, they are well versed in lots of things. There is a lot of talent and a lot of skill in the teaching pool at Oak Park. So creating a professional learning plan and how we roll that out involves multiple avenues. It's not just bringing in speakers and sending people out. It's looking at the talent and the skill set of the teachers in the house and utilizing those teachers to support one another. And so we really are looking at four themes relative to our professional learning plan next year: classroom environment, equity, social emotional learning, and differentiation. And so as we look at those things, we're working with our current teachers, we are working with our instructional coaches to map out not only individual learning plans, but district and cohorts of teachers that would get together and deeply learn and teach each other. The teachers were deeply engaged in this process. So this is not a situation where administration identified the learning, but the teachers had voice. The teachers identified the things they knew they needed to work with the freshman curriculum and beyond to really support students. The teachers are excited about it. We've already started. We had our first cohort of sorts led by teachers January 6th. The feedback from teachers was very, very positive. They enjoyed learning from their colleagues. And again, I just want to commend the teachers at Oak Park that the pool is deep. They have a lot of knowledge, and we are going to utilize all of that to continue to learn and grow together as a building.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Go ahead, scoot on by. All right, so at this point, we'll discuss the racial equity policy. But before we go into the racial equity policy, of course, this opens up a much larger conversation, right? Some very difficult conversations as we look at the history of our country. And the data can show us that we are primarily in this country stratified by social class and by race, right? So again, it opens up the door for some very difficult but necessary conversations as we speak to trying to address some of those systemic barriers that exist in larger society by way of starting in our very own institutions. And even seeing these disparities, they can start necessarily certainly at the educational institution, but also financial institutions, the criminal justice system. We can look into the American opportunity structure and see how all of these institutions are intertwined, right? So with these disparities and understanding that there is a systemic piece to this, here's an opportunity for us now to look at being intentional, right? And addressing these disparities through our policies, bless you, which will ultimately affect our practices and such, right? So when we talk about the racial equity policy, we'll give a little history here. A year ago, the year of 2018, 2019, in September, the Board of Education did approve a framework to be developed for the racial equity policy. Over the course of the school year last year, there was a committee put in place comprised of community stakeholders, parents, students, content experts that went ahead and developed the racial equity policy for our institution, and it was ultimately approved in April of 2019. The policy goal in and of itself, and actually our racial equity goals, are to ensure that race is no longer a predictor of social and academic outcomes, right? But what goes into that? So with this policy, the goal of it is really to address all of the systemic barriers to equity and access that typically will disproportionately affect students of color. It will position us in a unique way to take into account race and how race shows up in our daily lives, again, larger society, as well as in the educational or the academic setting. And even in that, we have to be sure that we remain cognizant of the intersectionality of our very diverse student population. So also understanding how race will also be intertwined and also touch base with other social factors, whether it be socioeconomic status, and what other groups that you may belong to. So race can definitely can intersect with those pieces as well. So then the racial equity policy itself is comprised of 12 sections. I won't necessarily go down and speak to each one of those, but here we'll just highlight the process of where we are in the development of our procedures. So again, the policy became this document that we adopted last year. Now in 2019, 2020, it's all about the development of those procedures. So of those 12, the ones you see highlighted in bold, we currently have language around those procedures that have been developed, not finalized. We're still getting feedback on those, but we do have a good amount of information in terms of the policy language that has been developed for those 6. So again, our goal is to develop procedures for all 12 of the procedure or the policy sections. So the way we go about that is we have these procedure development teams. First, we have these working groups. The working groups, they exist within the school, and each one of these sections has a working group that sits down. We research, look at data. There are a total of 38 racial equity policies that exist in the U.S., gathering data from those and then being able to then develop our policies, develop our procedures based on what we're seeing in other institutions and also what fits and works for us. So again, those are the smaller working groups that are working individually in teams, working in teams to then develop language for each one of those policy items. And then there's a racial equity procedure development committee. So this is a much larger committee that will meet monthly. So those working groups, they meet roughly every week because we're going back in, we're researching, we're refining our process, and again, developing that language. The racial equity procedure development committee, that committee meets once per month. And this is where those smaller working groups will then now group with the larger stakeholder group. So community members, parents, student voice is a big part of that. And the point of the Racial Equity Procedure Development Committee is to provide feedback on the language that has been developed to this point. Also, throughout this year, we're going to determine the procedural steps and also the metrics for the policy items. So we have to understand, okay, well, what metrics are we going to use? What are going to be our points of measurement to show that we are moving the needle in any one of these 12 areas? And then ultimately, we're going to determine steps for implementation going into the 2020-2021 school year. So then again, for those ones that are highlighted in bold, we have the equity analysis. The equity analysis is really at the foundation of what it's going to take for us to be a more racially conscienceless and culturally responsive institution. That racial equity analysis tool will be a set of questions which we will filter all of our decisions through. So whether we're talking about policy, courses, curriculum, discipline, we will be able to, again, ask ourselves a set of questions. Mm-hmm. So within those sets of questions, we have to ask ourselves, well, what racial groups are impacted by this decision, by this policy? Are there any existing disparities that exist or will come out of this decision that we're going to make? Are we involving stakeholders from underrepresented racial groups, right, in our decisions around policy, around discipline, around curriculum evaluation and development? Are there any systemic barriers that that currently exist or will be expanded due to this decision? And if there are any of those barriers, well, what are we doing to either eliminate or mitigate the negative impact of those decisions? Of course, stakeholder and community engagement. We are looking to engage racially and linguistically diverse community members, ensuring that they are welcomed into our institution, also providing them with an education on the resources that are available so we can look to narrow gaps and provide access for those folks as well. Diverse workplace initiatives. Dr. Pruitt-Adams spoke to that briefly. We are looking to create partnerships with various universities to do grow your own projects or grow your own programs. There's also the matter of connecting with historically Black colleges and universities to kind of cast a wider net in terms of our recruiting opportunities. And Roxana Sanders in the Human Resources Department, she also developed a talent management plan. And again, all of these pieces will be utilizing that equity analysis tool to ensure that we are being, again, culturally responsive and racially conscious in our decision making. Welcoming school environment really speaks to the culture that we have for our students, right? So whether it is administrators greeting students every morning or as they come into the building, or whether it is teachers greeting students as they come into classrooms, ensuring they get to their next class, we want to make sure we create an environment of inclusivity and a sense of belonging and warmth in our institution. Greg Johnson and Dr. Fiorenza spoke to our culturally responsive teaching and the evaluation or curriculum evaluation process that we're going through. That'll be something that'll be done every single year, just to be mindful of our curriculum and making sure that students are able to then connect with our curriculum. And then the last one that we currently have language developed for is the racial incident protocol. So in recent years, there have been a number of racially charged incidents, instances of racial misconduct, and we want to be sure that we have a system in place where students, staff, and the larger school district community can have an opportunity to report any instance of racial misconduct. There certainly will be a racial incident protocol team in place for both students and staff or employees to report to. It will mirror the current sexual misconduct policy that we have in place. But again, just wanted to have an opportunity for folks to be able to report any situation of racial misconduct so it can be addressed appropriately. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Pruitt-Adams.
I'm just going to add, as I bring it to close, if you click back to the strategic plan page, you heard this evening about teaching and learning. You heard this evening about how we receive our kids, how they exit out. You heard about the supportive learning environment in addition to the teaching component. You also heard about professional development, our hiring practices, and our decision-making practices. All of that falls within the strategic plan. And so everything we do, we try to align to that plan. When you look at the racial equity policy, it hits all of those components as well. Our goal is that in having everything flow through the strategic plan, which for every school district is the plan towards school improvement. We have a strong academic institution. We want to keep it that way, but we also want to bring all of our students up to that level so that as we move forward, we have no problem hitting that exemplary status. Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll just open it up to the trustees if they have any questions for the D200.
How much this is going to cost and how you got to pay for it. I mean, we're already one of the highest per student tax school districts in the state, so this sounds expensive.
That's one of the things that, as the board has charged us to have a zero-based budget. And so we are in the point now of, in our retreat next week, actively looking to see how we can cut over $750,000 from our budget. We firmly believe that we have the teachers. We have the expertise within our building. You heard Dr. Fiorenza speak to our teachers-led PD. They told us what they want. That's in-house. So we feel like we can do that. When we look at our expenditures in terms of resources and support, we've already started some realignment with how we provide that support for our students. Part of that process with the racial equity lens, part of that component at priority 4 about finance is to look at how we spend our money and the decisions we make on how we spend it. And so the notion is to take our dollars and put them where there's need, but we're not depriving anyone. So it is not intended at this point to increase the budget because we are charged to be good fiscal stewards of the district's dollars.
Very good. Any other further questions from the board? No. Well, I want to thank you again for coming out. I'll just leave a comment. One of the goals of our village trustee organization here is to strengthen our property values. That's one of our goals. Is, safety for all. Safety above all. Strengthening property values, and of course, stabilizing where we can property taxes. And we, much like you, everything we do, we look at those three kind of, I'll say, guiding principles. And so, obviously, the school, District 200 and District 90, is a big part. We certainly, as a village, could not do that on our own. Safety, we could, but certainly the other two, we have to work together.
Absolutely.
So, your direction, the changing direction, I mean, you're the professionals. We rely on you to make the right choices, and of course, the board. We applaud you for your work and all that you do for our community here in River Forest. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. John? Yeah. So, John, I'll ask John Phelan to come up on the topic of D200.
Thank you. My name's John Phelan. A lot of you know me. I want to congratulate Dr. Pruitt-Adams on Villager of the Year. They made a much better decision this year than they did in 2014. And I'll be quick because I know I'm the undercard for the deer discussion. As you saw from the presentation, there's a lot of great work being done at the high school. And Dr. Pruitt-Adams is I've come to know her as a friend, and she's a consummate professional, and I support a lot of what they're doing. But one of the things that was discussed was the freshman curriculum restructuring. And it's an incredibly important discussion that's been happening over at the high school. And I'm glad there's a good group here because I want to encourage everyone to pay attention to it. President Ducey, as you said at the during your comment, our property values are one of the incredibly important things that we have. And one of the reasons we all moved to River Forest, or certainly I did, aside from having grown up here, is the schools and the excellent education. And when I was the D200 president, I know River Forest provided 17% of the students at Oak Park and River Forest High School, provided 25% of the funding at the high school, and had 50% of the scholarship cup winners who had straight A's at the end of high school. And so we come from a community where educating our kids is critically important, and the support systems that I'm really glad are being looked at and put in place, we are that support system for our kids, or we have been for a long time, and we're really good at it, and I congratulate us for it. The concern I have is in the documentary that was done recently, there's a great scene where an English teacher was talking about what is equity and how to define it. And she had a group of kids line up and come up with an injury they had. First one had a headache. Second one said a shark bit off their leg. Third one said they had a heart attack. And she said, okay, equality is I'm going to give each one of you an Advil. And that's equality. Everybody gets the same. She said equity is to give each one what they need, whether it's first one for a headache, an Advil might be all right, but the guy who got his leg taken off by a shark, that's not going to help. Well, the same is true on the other end of the spectrum. When kids need to learn, they need to be challenged, they need rigor. And we've heard time and time again, they had 3 presentations on this. I was at all of them. I've read all of the resources they put up on the website about detracking and how they did it in Evanston and elsewhere. And I went to the town hall meeting and asked the board, and nowhere has detracking, at least of the type we're talking about, been successful in closing gaps in achievement. And I've become concerned about it. And so I get up to speak instead of watching the national championship game, which I know a lot of you are headed home for. Because I want us all to pay attention to this. The boards right now, most of the members are non-committal about whether they support the freshman curriculum restructuring because they haven't seen what it looks like yet. But there's going to be a vote on whether to implement a pilot, and then there's going to be a vote on whether to implement the initiative. And I just want to encourage everyone to keep a close eye on it and make sure that you're convinced that what they come up with is going to give your kid the rigor you need, because that's why we live here. That's why we enjoy the high property values and, unfortunately, the high property taxes we live with as well. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Steve? Yep.
I have to admit, so my name's Steve Lefko. I live at 719 Thatcher here in River Forest. I have to admit, I'm here because I saw D200 was going to be on the agenda. I didn't know it was deer night. But so I'm going to try to.
Sorry.
So the bonus, and it was a bonus to see the swearing as well.
Yeah.
So I'm here tonight. I'm going to read this. I'm going to try to be really quick. I'm here tonight because I saw the district owner was giving an update on the curriculum changes at the high school. So like John said, while there may still be questions on whether or not it's the right approach for gaining access to greater rigor, I definitely want to thank D200 for making the time to come to River Forest for this update. The best approach on matters this important is absolutely making the time for transparent discussion so that the community understands the problem and the proposed solutions. After all, we are really one big school system, D97, D90, and D200. So thank you again for coming to River Forest. And in my personal experience, these people are incredibly accessible. Regardless of how many questions you have, you usually do hear back in a pretty good manner, and I can only imagine how long your queue is now. My comment really is for the Village Board of Trustees regarding the District 90 update on curriculum changes. That wasn't on the agenda tonight. About 3 years ago, River Forest District 90 began its own K-8 curriculum restructuring. Then Board President Ralph Martiri described it as a change in instructional philosophy, one that, at that time most River Foresters were unaware of, and to this day most still don't understand it. That's based on my interpretation. The change in philosophy is generally this. River Forest has a long history of using an instructional philosophy that says novice learners should be provided with direct instructional guidance by teachers on the concepts and the procedures required by a particular discipline. It says that children should not be left to discover these concepts and procedures by themselves. Our new philosophy and new corresponding curricula and instructional practices follow an alternative philosophy that says people learn best in an unguided or minimally guided environment. It says that one that's generally defined as one in which the learners, rather than being presented with essential information, must discover or construct essential information for themselves. Now, I'm not here to debate philosophies. I'm here because District 90 isn't here to give an update on the board, to the board on facts and trends since adopting this new philosophy. In the 3 years since this change in philosophy, and I have a list, we've adopted a math curriculum that the National Center for Education Evaluation and Regional Assistance agrees is significantly poorer than the one it replaced, and as a result should reduce River Forest student achievement in math by 9 to 11%. Next, we've adopted a foundational literacy approach banned by other states because cognitive science refutes its use in teaching foundational reading. The administration recently gave a student assessment overview showing declines in both math and reading. Next, teacher morale has hit an all-time low according to state surveys. In 2019, Roosevelt Middle School saw an unprecedented decline in every measure of the 5 essential teachers survey, with the greatest fall in instructional leadership. In instructional leadership, we are now ranked in the 8th percentile for the state. Mm-hmm. Last year, we saw an above average in resignations from the district, and the anecdotal information for the future is not good. While we all love and our real estate agents brag about the Blue Ribbon schools, 2 of the 3 River Forest schools were downgraded this past year from exemplary to commendable. We no longer have an exemplary public school in River Forest. Meanwhile, our neighbors like Western Springs, LaGrange, and Hinsdale saw more of their schools reach exemplary status. Popular websites used by those who find school quality as an important guide for where to live show the negative effects of this new philosophy with a downward trend on quality. Go to School Digger is one great example. It's not a pretty picture. Given the long history of academic excellence in River Forest and the recent fall from excellence following these changes in curriculum and instruction, I'd urge you, the board, to begin by inviting District 90 to update your board on the changes to curriculum and instruction and the trends before and after these changes. Thanks for the chance to comment.
All right, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Okay, that concludes the D200s. Anybody else here for D200? Right. All right. We're going to move on to our agenda, which is the elected officials' comments and announcements, and then we have a public hearing, not too much, and then we'll get on to the consent agenda. So, and then what everybody's here for. which is the deer discussion. So I'll go ahead and ask for elected official comments and announcements, and I'll start with you, Bob, if you don't mind.
Thanks. I want to. We had a little bit of time off, so I had an opportunity to just kind of think about things, and I'm really excited about the work that we did at the end of last year, and I'm really energized about what we have coming up and going forward, and I'm looking forward to it. So that was about all I had. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Katie?
I don't have anything just to wish everyone a happy new year, and thanks for being here.
Katie?
Happy New Year. I just wanted to mention that since our last meeting, I did attend a reception put on by ComEd for the ComEd grant winners this year, and the River Forest Sustainability Commission applied for and won a ComEd grant for its Parkways for Pollinators program, which many of you may know goes along with your green block party. If you have a green block party, you have an option to have a pollinator garden planted on your block, and your families and kids can help do that, and then the pollinators that are attracted by that garden help pollinate the other plants and trees on your block. So the ComEd grant that the Sustainability Commission won will help fund that program for this next year. And I attended with Beth Chang, who is a Sustainability Commission member. I also wanted to mention that Joe Dominguez, who's the ComEd CEO, mentioned that he's particularly impressed with River Forest's Parkway for Pollinators program. He's very interested in bees, which is part of, pollinators. He indicated that he would like to take up beekeeping himself, and he referenced River Forest in his overall program remarks. He and I also discussed the possibility of collaborating on installing an electric vehicle charging station in River Forest. So that will be something that we'll talk about in the future.
Great. All good. I think the grant was mentioned in the newsletter. So if you all get the newsletter, you would have, I think, seen that portion. So that's great. Thank you, Katie.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Anything for you? Okay. Russ?
Okay. Just Happy New Year to everyone. And I also have, I guess, a personal / official announcement. Some of you may have already known that when I was a partner at Frantic, it used to be Frantic Rattlet. My firm at the time used to represent District 200 and District 90, and therefore, when it came to the TIF decisions, I had to recuse myself because of the common law conflict of interest. I'm happy to say, but even though I left the firm, I left Frantic, I took on an in-house general counsel with the Elgin Community College. I'm really happy about it. I left the firm on amicable reasons. But it also now allows me to vote on every issue that the village has. So pluses and minuses, I guess it depends on how you look at it. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Russ. We're glad you're here. Tom?
Other than to wish you a Happy New Year, I have nothing.
Okay, very good.
I'd love to start with a land acknowledgement. So as we begin, we're mindful that we hold these meetings on land that was once and still inhabited by Indigenous people, including the Ojibwa, the Chippewa, the Menominee, Potawatomi nations, and more, and that we remember our nation's history and honor the Native people as stewards of this land that was colonized, and that River Forest continues to be a place of many people from diverse backgrounds that live and gather. And so, Happy New Year, everyone. I want to do another congratulations to our new firefighter and paramedic. And thank you very much to D200 for coming out today. I do want to just give another plug for Census 2020. We're in 2020 now. So April 1st is Census Day. And what that means is that sometime in March, you will be receiving in the mail a code or a piece of letter. So don't throw that census material away. It's very important. And what they're doing for the majority of people this year, for the census that happens every 10 years is asking people to either do your census over the phone or the internet. So the majority of you guys are going to be filling out your census that way for 2020. And then for those who don't do that within the first couple of weeks, people who are tasked to come to your doors and try to get the information that way will be doing that. So if you don't want someone to come to your door to ask you all these questions about the census, fill it out online or by phone. There aren't many questions at all, and it means so much to our community. We have a list of 50 ways the census data are used, and I'm going down the list. So for tonight's meeting, the census information helps plan budgets for government at all levels and also helps in spotting trends in economic well-being of the nation.
Yeah. Thank you. Erica, let me ask a question. Will there be like a fair day, like when you can come to a place?
Yeah, so River Forest has connected with very many, I want to say somewhere around 40 different organizations and groups and people within the River Forest community to find the best ways to let everybody know in River Forest. So there will be events around the library.
So one on January 14th? That's at 19th Century?
So there's one tomorrow with the League of Women Voters. So you can see me, and we'll be talking further about the census there. We will have events through the library, throughout the community, and hopefully you'll be seeing the census represented across the community. It's really important to talk to your friends and neighbors about it because you'd be surprised how many people are underrepresented.
Yep.
Veterans are underrepresented in the census. Young children who haven't started in the educational schooling are typically not represented. Of course, there are racial groups that are underrepresented as well. So there's just a lot. So the more you talk to this, and that's really what we want, right? Is we want everyone talking about the census and letting people know, hey, don't throw away that piece of mail. Remember that you're going to do it by phone or by the internet. And we hopefully, I think, are going to have a few different ways throughout the end of April or throughout the end of March and April for people who might be harder to do that, to have access to some resources to be able to fill that census out.
Great. Super. Thank you so much. Very important stuff. So we really appreciate your efforts on this. Okay, I have just a few things. First of all, just a couple of maybe handouts I'd like to give out. One is the IML 2020 State Legislative Agenda, and it's a really nice kind of a brochure that's put together by the Illinois Municipal League, and they really are, I'll call it our legislative arm down in Springfield on issues that are very important to the 1,900 municipalities that are in the state of Illinois. So it's the Illinois Municipal League. They're very active, and this is their 2020 agenda. So, I guess we could just pass that to the trustees. I don't have enough. And this is the IML Federal Legislative Agenda. They also represent Illinois municipalities, of course, all of us at the federal level, because the federal level passes laws as well that affect us. So these are just, if you can give these to the trustees. The major law that was passed and signed by Governor Pritzker was the pension consolidation law. I don't know if any one of you heard about that, but it was significant for the municipalities. It was basically taking 650 downstate. It excludes the city of Chicago, but it includes the suburbs and the downstate municipalities and collapsed them into 3 pension plans. And so the purpose of that, everything's going to stay separate in terms of the dollars and the assets, but what is gained is the administration of those pension plans. And so the actuaries, lawyers, all the things that go around when you administrate the pension plan. So they believe they're in the millions, of savings. So that will go directly back into the pension. So it was a significant bill for us in Illinois and for us in the municipality. So a lot in this report for all of you that are listening. And oh, by the way, we are live, Facebook and YouTube. Listening or even here, go on the IML website. It's really a great website and a lot of information that you can garner in terms of what's going down, good stuff that's going down in Springfield. Also, I just want to give kudos out to Greg Smith. He was appointed to serve on the Illinois Municipal League's Home Rule Attorney Committee. Congratulations. That's a big thing. We always like to see our lawyers representative down in Springfield. Also, we were able to provide some sponsorship to Pezos for their 10th annual celebration.
Yes,
so
thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. That was, I think, a great partnership between the municipality and a wonderful organization. So let's see. Couple things. I had some meetings. I met with the new Byline CEO and president. As you know, Byline purchased the Oak Park River Forest Community Bank, and so it was really important to welcome them here into River Forest, and they're very excited to be have a branch in River Forest, and they're part of, continue to want to be part of our community. Susie Goldschmidt was with me as well. Both Eric and I met with Commissioner Silvestri, which I will talk about when we get to the deer piece. But that was a great meeting in terms of what we need to do together more in not only legislative, but, funding purposes. And then last, we hosted 30 plus 6 and 7-year-old Girl Scouts on Friday. It was kind of nice and pretty cool. They really enjoyed it. They went to go see a cell in the police department. And they were quite, kind of shocked at first, and then kind of like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then we gave them a tour of our fire department, and that was really, they really enjoyed that. So if any one of you are, a scout master or scout leader, and you'd like to have them come to River Forest Village Hall, and they have a civic, opportunity, we would love to have them here. We always welcome that opportunity. All right, so that's about all I have in terms of my list, and I'll go ahead. We've got a public hearing that we have. It's quick, so don't feel like you have to sit through an hour of public hearing. No. This is a public hearing that we need to do to, kind of implement and vote on, or eventually vote on the special service area. So I'm going to hand that over to you, Eric.
Madam President, if I could just have you call the public hearing to order.
I'd like to call the public hearing to order.
This is a public hearing in regard to River Forest Special Service Area Number 11, providing for the payment of extraordinary ambulance and paramedic response costs in the event that the owners of the property fail to do so when required under Ordinance 3714. Under the authority, this public hearing is being held pursuant to the ordinance passed by the President and Board of Trustees on December 9th, 2019, and said ordinance being entitled, An Ordinance Proposing the Establishment of Special Service Area Number 11, the Sheridan Project, in the Village of River Forest, and providing for a public hearing and other procedures in connection therewith. Notices. Pursuant to Section 3 of the aforementioned ordinance, notice of this public hearing in the form set forth in Section 4 of the aforementioned ordinance was given as follows. A, publication of said notice in the Wednesday Journal newspaper on December 18th, 2019, and mailing said notice to the real estate tax assessee for each parcel of property located within this proposed special service area on December 18th, 2019. Description of the project. Providing for the payment of extraordinary ambulance and paramedic response costs in the event that the owners of the property fail to do so when required under Ordinance 3714. explanation of the method of financing the project, special service area financing, including the cap of the maximum tax rate, $7.29 per $100 of equalized assessed valuation of the property subject to the special service area, the fact that the special service area is perpetual and how the obligation will be repaid on the real estate tax bill based on the assessed valuation of the parcels involved, but with the tax levy only being imposed in the event that the property owners fail to pay for the extraordinary cause of ambulance and paramedic services provided by the village to the property in question as required by Ordinance 3714. At this time, I would entertain if there's anyone who would like to make a comment or have any questions on this to come to the podium.
But if you want, yeah, come on, Buff. If you have a question on this, this is the SSA. Yeah, you need to come to the podium because people can't hear you on the face live stream that we're doing now.
What does an ambulance cost? What does a typical paramedic ambulance cost? Because we know it's not covered by most insurances.
Right. So there's different ways to view that, certainly. And Chief Bowman, if you want to come on up, you have the cost of the actual ambulance run. You have the cost of what we bill the insurance. You have the cost of what Medicare would reimburse for. And so you have all those different parts. What this is doing tonight is putting a mechanism in place in that in the event the project at Chicago and Harlem, the threshold by which a ambulance impact fee would be triggered and they are subject to pay that and they don't pay it for whatever reason, we can levy that amount onto their property tax bill. Right. So this is a belt and suspenders approach to make sure that the taxpayers aren't stuck with that bill going forward. The hope is that this would never be utilized at all, but this is just the best practice we put in place to make sure the community is protected.
Does it make sense? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Do you need further explanation? Or? Okay. Yep. Okay.
The actual cost of an ambulance bill, there's 3 levels ranging from BLS to ALS1 and ALS2, and the ranges are between $900 and $1,500. Okay?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
All right. Hearing no other questions or comments, we will need a motion and a second to adjourn the public hearing.
For final adjournment of the hearing, please.
Yeah. So can I get a motion and a second to adjourn the final meeting?
I move to close the public hearing and adjourn.
Second.
Final meeting.
Final.
Did
Second.
we do a voice vote?
Voice vote is fine.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, now we're done with item 5. We'll move on to 6. Now, I know you've been here, Robert, to talk about which one? The chamber, C. Why don't you just you step up and, why don't we just have that conversation right now, and then we'll go through the consent agenda. So this is a resolution supporting the Oak Park River Forest Chamber of Commerce 2020 Professional Development Program. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Angela Cooper. I'm the Associate Vice President of Nursing at Rush Oak Park Hospital. We wanted to thank you for considering support of our program. For those of you that don't know what the program is, it is a collaboration between the Oak Park River Forest Chamber of Commerce and the Brennan School of Business at Dominican University. Together, we will develop a schedule of programs to cultivate, enhance, and expand local business knowledge for success to our business area and beyond. We want to offer our local business communities with the valuable resources we have in town and help the growth of their businesses, as well as support business knowledge for our business owners. It is an extraordinary that the expertise of Dominican faculty will be available to small business owners in a way that might otherwise not be accessible to them. There will be 6 sessions with topics such as cash flow, conflict resolution, marketing, and engagement. This education that is provided can be used right away to improve the health of businesses immediately in our community. I work for Rush Oak Park, and we have strategic initiatives in place to support businesses within the community and on the west side of Chicago, and it makes me proud to be a member of the Chamber with the great work that is occurring. thank you again. We can't thank you enough for your potential support of this program. Just so you know as well, it is being designed in a way that makes it accessible to the community as a whole.
Right.
So if you're a member of the chamber, you can attend all 6 sessions for $199. And then individuals who are not members of the chamber can attend for $299. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
I'm Robert Stellatello. I'm past president of the OPRF Chamber of Commerce, a current board member, and also a small business owner in town. I have a company that provides in-home care for seniors and disabled adults. A program like this is something that would cost thousands of dollars if you were to access it in the city or in an educational setting. So this partnership is transformational, and this information is really invaluable to that. I appreciate your consideration and a pledge of support for that, and look forward to the resolution.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Well,
And I'm also the current secretary for the board as well, even though I work at Oak Park.
you guys do great work, so thank you for what you do for our businesses. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and I'll ask the trustee to move and one to second the consent agenda A through L. Please.
I move that we approve the consent agenda items A through L.
Okay, thank you. Before we vote, I'd ask the clerk to please read out loud the consent agenda.
Consent agenda item A, regular village board meeting minutes, December 9th, 2019. B, update to the village personnel policy manual regarding cannabis. C, resolution supporting the Oak Park River Forest Chamber of Commerce 2020 Professional Development Program resolution. D, amend section 3815 of the Village Code regarding the imposition of a municipal cannabis retailer's occupation tax due to a cleanup bill adopted by the Illinois General Assembly ordinance. E, amend section 3814 of the Village Code regarding the imposition of a local motor fuel tax due to a cleanup bill adopted by the Illinois General Assembly ordinance. F, waiver of formal bid due to competitive quotes for service and award of contract to Unique Plumbing Company for the manhole replacement at North Avenue and Bonnie Bray in a not-to-exceed amount of $33,200. G, change order number 1 final for the 2019 street improvement project for $14,724.15 resolution. H, monthly department reports. I, monthly performance measurement report. J, financial report, November 2019 and December 2019. K, accounts payable, December 2019, $1,472,549.32. L, village administrator's report.
Okay. Very good.
Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Great. Just a quick comment, because there's so many people here, maybe hopefully people listening, is that if you ever want to know a lot about what's going on in the village hall, I'd really look at that monthly department reports. The department heads put a lot of work into that report, and it is really good. And it has enormous amount of information. So if you ever think for a minute we're not transparent here, you got to read that report, and you would agree that there's a lot of information there, and you can get it anytime, anytime during the day. All right, so we have no items for consent items for separate consideration. He ran off, but he didn't need to. Is he used to it? Probably. He's just so used to it. So we have no recommendations of boards, commissions, and committees. So we will go on to our unfinished business, which is 9A. I would like to get a motion and a second to move so we can have these conversations, and then I will invite the residents to come and speak.
I will move to approve an intergovernmental agreement with the Forest Preserve District of Cook County for a wildlife management program.
Second.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I will ask, we've got a few. We've got about 15, 16 people here. And if we've missed any, I'll be certainly put you all on here. It's, I'm not trying to exclude anybody. But I will ask, because we have a lot of people that want to speak, and it is almost 8:30, that maybe we have a 5-minute limit. I ask that you stay within the 5-minute limit. If you could do better than that, that'd be great. But I only ask that you stay within that 5-minute limit. then we can move things on. So with that, Marta, please. Thank you. Well, you're up on the first.
Good evening and Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Marta Kosber and I reside at 1235 Monroe Avenue. I've been a resident of River Forest for 47 years. I would again like to thank all of our trustees for the work they do and the time they give to work for our village. In 1980, Illinois school children voted to select the white-tailed deer as a state animal. In 1982, our state adopted this. For the indigenous people of North America, the deer was an animal of power and a totem representing sensitivity and intuition, a sacred animal with the spirit of gentleness and softness, a messenger of peace. Sir David Attenborough stated, "We, one single species, have ourselves taken over vast tracts of the habitable surface of this planet. Surely we should allow these other species to share the planet with to retain some part of their ancient heritage." I've seen deer, coyote, fox, raccoon, skunk, possum, rabbit, bats, squirrels, chipmunks, mice, and many species of birds in our yard. I welcome each and every one. We share a habitat. Raccoons carry and can transmit roundworm, leptospirosis, salmonella, rabies. The first three are spread by droppings smaller than deer droppings. Skunks carry contagious diseases, viruses, and parasites that can be transmitted to humans. Their droppings are also dangerous and smaller than a deer, so you might not see it. Squirrels and chipmunks carry I'll apologize for any mispronunciations. Tularemia, typhus, plague, and ringworm. Bats carry rabies, Nipah, Ebola, histoplasmosis, and Marburg. Possums carry parasites. Coyotes, distemper, and canine hepatitis are most common. Rabies and tularemia also occur. Birds, psittacosis can be transmitted to humans, causing flu-like symptoms. One thing all of these animals have in common and carry are the black-legged tick that causes Lyme disease. All of them carry the tick. It would seem that River Forest is a pretty dangerous place to live. Animals run out of space as humans approach and encroach their territory. And so now we are going to shoot them because they're eating our plants and leaving droppings in our yards. How mighty and powerful we have become. Which animal will be next on the village list for extermination, since they all seem to be pretty dangerous? How is it possible that our village trustees are voting on deer culling issues after agreeing to form a task force to gather data on this very issue? Data that was not collected before deciding to shoot the deer. Why was a task force not formed? And tonight, it seems that the IGA is on the agenda ahead of the task force discussion. Isn't that working backwards? Shouldn't the task force work to make recommendations on how to handle deer in Thatcher Woods before they're shot and killed? Because once they're dead, they're not an issue. Other municipalities in Cook County have formed task forces and together with the FPCC and the IDNR have provided detailed data of environmental impact studies of deer and other animals on plants and the environment. Based on data, decisions were made to cull herds of deer or not. In some cases, non-lethal methods proved to work before having to resort to lethal methods. Why are we in such a hurry to push this through and spend $200+ without doing the proper research? At the last meeting, Kathy, you were adamant that the board need to govern, and I agree. You need to govern, but you need to govern fairly. You need to make informed decisions where all stakeholders are considered and all avenues have been studied and based on real data. We can't be governed by scare tactics and intimidation. To govern is to bring people together and not to tear them apart. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Marta. Thank you.
Good evening. Happy New Year.
Yep.
My name is Oscar Cosbor. I live I live at 1235 Monroe Avenue in River Forest, and I've been a resident for 29 years here. I have to say that I am deeply disturbed that contrary to the board's vote in November to set up a task force that would follow IDNR, the Department of Natural Resources, Cornell University, Humane Society, and other agency recommendations to gather supporting data, analyze data, develop a plan for deer management, and then implement the plan, the board was pressured to abandon that approach and is now being asked today to vote to immediately proceed to the final option of slaughtering deer. Excuse me. A survey of all of the residents of River Forest has not been conducted, which, by the way, is part of the data that is recommended by these various agencies to be gathered. Village administration has relied on anecdotal requests from only a select few residents. No effort has been made to gather and thoughtfully evaluate and present data about the site and health of the deer herd and the human health and safety issues. Also, no effort has been made to carefully consider alternative approaches to addressing issues before resorting to the extreme remedy of destroying wildlife. The Forest Preserve has just this past week provided a letter to village administration, but it consists primarily, essentially, of generalities about deer. There is no specific data about Thatcher Wood or its deer herd. There is a vague reference to some kind of plant assessment, whatever that is, but as learned today, you'll hear further information from my colleagues about this. There are no documents that exist about plants in Thatcher Woods or any kind of damage that's being done by deer there. There's also nothing specific about any health or safety issues involving village residents. During the December meeting, Kathy Ducey very forcefully pointed out that the board must govern. And by govern, it was implied that the board must vote directly for deer slaughter. However, I submit that governing is not just for select few, but should be for all of the residents of River Forest. So why has a village-wide survey of all of the residents of River Forest not been conducted? Is it because some are afraid of the final results of that survey? Given the manner in which this issue has been handled, it appears that a decision to kill deer was made without due consideration or input, and everything that has been done since April was based on achieving this predetermined outcome without due regard for the views of all village residents. Next point to consider is cost. The Forest Preserve District of Cook County has an annual working budget of $120 million. $1 million of this is to the USDA to assist in the Forest Preserve's deer management program, including culling of deer within their properties. The Forest Preserve experts, whose expertise Kathy and Eric rely on, have determined by supporting data that they have that there is a need to remove 350 deer within their 70,000 acres of property this year. That amounts to about one deer for every 175 acres. Thatcher Woods, think about this, has only about 350 acres. Yet the Forest Preserve wants us to pay $40,000 a year to kill 40 deer. So where did this exorbitant number of 40 deer come from? We don't know, because there is no reliable scientific data that has been gathered for Thatcher Woods. Also, since the Forest Preserve considers our areas to be one of the prime areas, and they are already spending our tax money for management efforts, why are we being asked to pay $200,000 plus to them again? Additionally, the IGA is poorly written in that we are committing to a down payment of $40,000 the first year with, get this, no itemized definition of what work will be done. I do not believe that any of us would reasonably sign a contract for $200,000 plus for 5 years for unspecified work on our house. Why is the village entertaining this contract? Within the last few weeks, a new proposal has also surfaced from village administration in that River Forest would, in essence, be subsidizing Elmwood Park's slaughter of deer. Elmwood Park borders approximately the same amount of acreage as River Forest. The new proposal states that the agreement with the Forest Preserve District would now include the properties bordering Elmwood Park. Elmwood Park then, however, would only pay $10,000 a year, and River Forest would pay $30,000 a year to cover this work. Does this really sound financial management? And how does this make any sense? In conclusion, I respectfully and strongly request that you consider delaying for 1 year the unsubstantiated slaughter of deer next to our village and approach this in the correct manner as recommended by IDNR, Cornell University, Humane Society, and other respected agencies. Given all of this, it is not fair to the board members to expect them to digest all of this relevant information and demand that they make a rash voting decision today. The task force that was discussed in November and agreed upon needs to happen as previously agreed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, off. Thanks.
Good evening and Happy New Year. My name is Elizabeth Martin and I live at 1130 Lathrop. Tony Moore and I came to this board over 10 years ago requesting help with the deer problem then. Since then, the deer have proliferated. I have 7 that live in our yard off and on most of the year. And it's not just a matter of culling the herd because they will reproduce. There are no natural predators to stop them from reproducing or really prey on them. They are overpopulated. You talk about space. Humans haven't encroached on them in the last 10 years as much as they have encroached on the humans, because when a doe has a fawn, it's not just 1, it's usually 2 and sometimes 3, which is the reason they run out of space, and it's the reason that they come into our yards and make our yards their salad bowls. There's a problem. It's not just the damage to the landscape, but it's also the human threat of disease and ticks, which, as the First Lady said, are carried by all animals. But their excrement, which is nasty, they don't have pickups like we do for our dogs. And it's also the traffic problems. The deer cause quite a bit of commotion when they cross Thatcher, unpredictably, as they are wild animals, so they are unpredictable. But I don't really think that we want River Forest to be a gated community, and by that I mean where everybody has to build a 6-foot fence in order to keep the deer out. I think that would be too bad, because part of River Forest's appeal is the park-like setting that the homes have. I agree that there should be a survey of the residents, and I think that, if people aren't affected, if they don't have the deer problem in their yards, maybe they put does not affect. But otherwise, if they feel that they are affected by the deer, they can say yes, and if they aren't, they can say no. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Very good. Okay. David? There you go. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you for giving me a few minutes. My name's David Record. Excuse me. I live at 1308 Lathrop. My wife and I have lived there for 35 years. And I'm an avid, if not rabid, supporter of culling of the herd. After reading Mr. Randall's note from the Forest Preserve, it seems like we'd be irresponsible to not participate to reduce the overabundance of the deer population, its impact on native plants, animals, and the Thatcher Wood Preserve. The cost is minimal. I think it's a few tenths of a percent of our budget, annual budget. From a personal point of view, our landscape damage this past year was over $5,000. They carry, as we heard, Lyme disease ticks, E. coli in their excrement, and the traffic hazards, as Eric pointed out in his note on the website, are increasing. So why not let nature take its course? Well, Tim Pruitt told us in June in his presentation for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources that there was a 30% reduction in, 40% reduction in the deer population, 30% of which was caused by indigenous people. This is before we white folks were around. And 40%, that was brought up to 40% with predators such as coyotes and wolves. I don't think we're going to introduce any of those indigenous people, predators, or wolves. So thanks for your excellent work, Jonathan, Eric, and Kathy on this, and I hope we move forward.
Thank you, David. Okay. Tony? Thank you.
My name is Tony Moore, and Happy New Year, everyone. And I live at 1100 Lathrop Avenue. I think I was maybe one of the first people to instigate a discussion about this. And what prompted me was the fact that I was walking my dogs and I saw 11 deer in our block on one particular day. In the meantime, I've spoken to people who've had as many as 7 or 8 deer in their backyard. And that just seems unacceptable in a residential neighborhood, especially if you don't think they're cute. Let's see. What I wanted to point out was that I don't think anyone wants to annihilate the deer. I think they're charming in moderation, but what we'd like to do is to restore a healthy balance between them and us. We have been affected by landscape damage, but that doesn't bother me. You know, the fact that they eat the lilies is inconvenient, but the most important part is the fact that they carry Lyme disease, or ticks that carry Lyme disease. And I think we've heard from other residents in the past who have children who have Lyme disease as a result, and they don't know where it comes from. But it seems to me that the more vectors for Lyme disease that you have in a community, the more increased your chances are of getting it. And so I think at some point the board has to make a decision. You know, you have to take a leap of faith, or give something the benefit of the doubt. And I hope that you'll choose people instead of deer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Very good. Hey, Linda? Let's see, Linda. Casey? There you are.
Hello, everybody. I'm Linda Lucchese. I live at 1231 Monroe. And I'm listening to both sides. And my point is, I need some repair on my roof. I go out and get 1, 2, 3 bids, get the cost, compare the cost, see what one contractor might say, well, I'm going to do this. The other one will say, well, maybe I'll do that. And I don't think we as residents have given any information about other other means of solving this problem that some people think it's a problem. I don't. So that's my only concern. I'd like more information, more surveys done, whatever, before we go ahead with this. I think there's other ways to solve this problem. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Linda. Marla? Marla? Okay.
Hi, my name is Marilla Sheridan Blum. I live at 7214 Oak. And I'll keep it simple. I don't agree with killing the deer. I just got back from my sister's home in Charlottesville, Virginia, and she has 25 deer in her backyard at any given time of day. And she has beautiful hosta because she uses deer repellent. She's very vigilant.
Yep.
She works at it. And if the hosta and your gardens are a problem, there are lots of products to buy that work. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I agree. Okay. Mary? Thank you. Mary? You're up next.
Thank you. I'm Mary Vanker, 1234 Monroe Avenue. We're having a lot of Monroe representation tonight. I wish to comment tonight in opposition to approving the proposal to begin killing deer in Thatcher Woods. At the December 9th meeting, the board was set to discuss a deer task force process to evaluate issues involving deer, to develop a thoughtful approach based upon comprehensive data, community involvement, and the lessons learned from the efforts and experiences of other communities. I was very disappointed that the board failed to follow through on this because it is the right approach. Beginning by adopting a deer culling program and only then considering the formation of a task force gets it exactly backwards. It is contrary to expert recommendations, the proper approach pursued by other communities, and good sense. Some of you have recently asked me how a deer task force might be formed, how it would operate, and what it might accomplish. I have consulted multiple sources to review existing programs for deer management and committee formation. Time permitting, I would like to try briefly to answer the question and explain why there is no reason that a committee cannot be formed and develop a proposed plan of action with a relatively short period of time measured in months. First, though, it is relevant to understand how we got to the point we are at now, and also what I have learned from recent communication with the IDNR. It is clear from information provided in response to FOIA requests that the village has for a number of years been asking the Forest Preserve to begin killing deer in Thatcher Woods, and the Forest Preserve saw no reason to spend taxpayer-provided funds to do so. Then, early last year, in response to some number of resident complaints, the village began discussions with the IDNR and the Forest Preserve about killing deer if the village would pay the costs. The village management thus appears to have made a decision to begin killing deer before making any reasonable effort to study the matter or gather appropriate information. Very recently, the village has stated that its proposal is based upon information provided by the IDNR. However, through FOIA release of email documents, it is clear that the village is proposing to proceed in a manner that is directly contrary to the approach that the IDNR repeatedly urged the village to adopt. A more accurate statement would be to say the village has received information from the IDNR and chosen to ignore it. It is also apparent that over the past week, the village administration has been working overtime, trying to cobble together information that it believes supports its proposal to begin killing deer. Making a decision and then trying to selectively backfill with data and information is not a good government process. Also, given the importance of this issue to so many in the community, it is not reasonable to dump selected potentially relevant information on the board in this way and insist that it make an immediate decision. It is not fair to the board or the community that they represent. In order to gather information about a possible task force, I had a lengthy conversation on Tuesday, January 7th of this year with Tim Pruce, the Urban Deer Project Manager for the IDNR. He is the expert that the village administration has cited as an authority on deer management. Mr. Pruce confirmed that he was on numerous occasions, beginning at an initial meeting in April 2019. He recommended and urged that Eric Palm and Jonathan Pape should start by assessing the concerns of village residents by, among other things, conducting surveys to identify resident attitudes about deer and related concerns. Mr. Pruce stressed that the village needed to fully understand what the issues are in order to develop a reasonable, data-based, and specific management program. He recommended that an analysis be conducted looking for patterns that can be remediated with inexpensive, non-lethal solutions. The village administration ignored this expert's recommendations and urgings and has stated that there is no need to survey the community or to consider alternatives to killing the deer because the Forest Preserve District of Cook County is not, and not the village, is applying for the permit to kill deer. This is false. Mr. Pruce advised the village knowing who would be submitting the application, and his expert recommendations apply fully to our situation. Significantly, Mr. Pruce told me that he has worked with numerous communities to set up deer management committees and develop deer management programs, and that in most cases, killing deer turns out not to be necessary. Also, Mr. Pruce told me that culling deer before developing specific goals and creating a task force after culling the deer is doing things backwards and will not work. And perhaps most importantly, he told me that he would be happy to attend meetings of a task force to help us do this work by providing resources, guidance, and direction. The question of how to select a committee members is an important one. We don't need to look far and wide for examples of forming committees. We have examples from D200, D90, Strategic Planning, and most recently the D200 Imagine Committee. I have the details for the Northbrook Deer Management Committee. They have been posted. They posted a great deal of information on the Community Deer Advisor website run by Cornell University and the Nature Conservancy. This is a website that Tim Pruce directed me to use for guidance in creating a committee. The Community Deer Advisor website has an active link for a community to follow by answering pertinent questions that can aid in creating a deer management plan. I'm also sure that Mr. Pruce would be happy to help us design an effective committee. In terms of how the committee might work, based upon information set forth in the Cornell Community Deer Advisor website, the committee would meet to agree upon the relevant issues, including a problem definition, identify and request relevant information, assess community attitudes about the presence of deer and problems their presence presents. The committee would then identify specific objectives and goals, evaluate alternatives to achieve them, and propose a recommended course of action and a process to monitor and measure achievements and the goals so that the plan can be revised as appropriate. Interestingly, after saying that it has no time to assist in gathering data relevant to a decision to begin shooting deer, the village has just this weekend provided information about resident complaints and dead deer. This is some of the information that a committee could use to thoughtfully evaluate the problem and potential solutions. What the committee approach would accomplish would be to ensure that the community is educated about the issues and the approach that ultimately is decided upon, that we develop an approach that is data-based and cost-effective, and that we do not needlessly or unintentionally damage our wildlife or waste limited financial resources. I also think it is important to note that I can see no reason that a committee could be formed and directed to present recommendations in a fairly short period of time. It need not require a large number of meetings and need not take many months after committee formation. There is no compelling reason to begin killing deer this season rather than pursue the IDNR recommended approach of gathering data and developing a proper deer management program for our village. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Okay. Frank? Is Frank still here? Yep, there you go. All right.
My name is Frank Vanker. I live at 1234 Monroe. My wife Mary just spoke, and I share her concerns and observations. I also want to say that personally, I'm not opposed to all efforts to manage wildlife. But any such efforts should be based upon a carefully considered plan to achieve specific, quantified objectives at the lowest cost to taxpayers and with the minimum possible destruction of wildlife. Beyond that, I'd like to share a couple comments about the proposed IGA because I believe there are several reasons not to approve that contract tonight. First, it's important to understand what the village is agreeing to. The proposed IGA is not a contract to pay the direct cost of killing any deer or identified number of deer. Paragraphs 4 and 6 of the IGA expressly state that the village will provide all funding, quote, for the management of white-tailed deer in Thatcher Woods, and that the village will be responsible for all costs incurred up to $40,000 per year. Under this contract, we are responsible for paying not only the direct costs of culling deer, but all other costs incurred for an unidentified deer management program. Such costs would include the cost of all time and any money spent by the Forest Preserve or anyone it hires to monitor and implement every aspect of a deer management program. At the November meeting, the village administration stated that the Forest Preserve will have skin in the game because it will incur administrative costs. But this contract makes clear that is not correct. All costs are chargeable to the village. For example, if the Forest Preserve spends any time or money to survey the deer population or the impact of deer on the health of the forest, we are obligated to pay for it. The Forest Preserve, consistent with IDNR guidelines, should be doing this already before beginning a deer culling program and not after. We know that they are not doing it and they have not done it. They previously stated that their proposal to kill deer in Thatcher Woods was based upon a survey of the deer population. FOIA disclosures revealed no such survey exists. In the recent letter provided by the Forest District that was referred to earlier, there's reference to an assessment of the habitat of the Forest Preserve. That's a nebulous term, not quite as direct or concrete as a survey. But just today, as you will hear, the Forest Preserve responded to a FOIA request stating it has done nothing with respect to the habitat of Thatcher Woods and has no documents related to the plant material in the forest or the impact of deer on it. Given that the Forest Preserve has a $120 million budget and it pays the USDA $1 million a year to assist with deer and wildlife management, one has to ask why the village should assume complete financial responsibility for deer management in Thatcher Woods. We are already paying the forest preserve for this activity. And even if we did want to assume financial responsibility for wildlife management in the forest preserve, we're going about it the wrong way. We should insist, before they begin to kill the deer, that they gather the data that we know they gather to support applications to cull deer in other areas of the forest preserve, and that they develop, in consultation with us, a very specific plan if we're going to pay for it. The fact that they have not done so, and that we are not insisting on it, I think shows that the real goal of the village is simply to start killing deer and not to effectively manage the forest. It also should be pointed out that the direct cost of culling deer in Thatcher Woods would not appear to cost anything close to $40,000 per year. The IDNR has estimated that the average cost of killing and processing a deer using sharpshooters is approximately $250 to $500 per deer. If we cull 30 to 50 deer, the direct cost using these estimates should be $7,500 to $25,000. The work that we are contracting for would pay an amount that is 100% to 400% greater than the estimated cost to cull deer. So what are we paying for? We don't know, because you've been presented with a contract that says we're going to pay for work. It's capitalized. I'm a lawyer. Usually in a contract, when a term is capitalized, it's defined. Well, the work in this contract is nowhere defined. There's no specification of what's going to be done, or what the village or what the forest preserve is going to charge, or how it's going to arrive at a $40,000 charge to the village. Interestingly, the forest preserve has a contract with the USDA for deer management. And that contract has a multi-page attachment which details what the USDA is going to be doing and what it's going to cost. If somebody wants to suggest that the forest preserve wants a signed contract before developing a reasonable contract, I submit that's not good enough. It's not good enough for the forest preserve when they're on the paying end. So, nor is it enough, I think, to say that, well, we can cancel the contract. The fact that we are here in January and we do not have a work plan for a project that is to be implemented immediately by beginning to kill the deer demonstrates that in year one of this contract, we have not carefully questioned or scrutinized the expenditure. And it suggests there is no reason to think that we can or will do so in the future. Just add very briefly that, and $40,000 isn't the only cost, because under this contract, we have to provide all required support, including law enforcement and site security. I am not aware that the village has even determined what assistance will be required, let alone what it will cost. So, let me just say, with respect to the Elmwood Park deal, it's been mentioned. I don't know why we should be subsidizing deer management in lands adjacent to Elmwood Park. But perhaps even more important than that is, we've been advised that $40,000 is required to manage the Thatcher Woods. Now we're being told that the same $40,000 will be enough to manage an area twice the size. That suggests to me that no one has done the work necessary to design a proper deer management program and begin to destroy wildlife in this area. In this regard, I think the proposed Elmwood Park deal just highlights that we are rushing headlong in a desire of some to start killing deer without careful deliberation. You should not approve the proposed IGA at this time. It would be better to take a little time to develop a proper plan to address any deer issues in accordance with the way the IDNR has recommended and other communities have done.
Okay, thanks, Frank. All right. Jerry, you still here? Hi, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Humbert, 1319 Park Avenue. Thank you all for your service. I attended the village board meeting in November to express my concern about signing a $200,000 IGA to cull the deer. At that point, we had had one partial year of increased deer sightings in river forests. We had had data from car accidents with deer that showed an actual decrease in the deer versus car accidents from 2018 to 2019 rather than an increase. There's no evidence or data that there was a sudden deer population explosion in Thatcher Woods. There is evidence that the Des Plaines River was much higher this spring and summer, which could be the reason for the increased deer sightings. It's interesting that the deer sightings have dropped dramatically this late fall and winter, just as the levels of the Des Plaines River have also dropped. I can't remember the last time I've seen a deer. It's been several months, and I live very close to the forest preserve. If we do have a dramatic increase in deer population, they certainly don't appear to be starving to death because there's not many deer grazing on our lush landscaping. Yes, this is anecdotal evidence from me driving around all the time, but that's the only evidence that I've seen so far in the river forest deer culling saga. At the November meeting, I witnessed the village board decide to form a community task force to gather data, evaluate the problem, and determine potential solutions that would both make logical and fiscal sense. Now it appears that signing the IGA is being presented again tonight for a vote. If I did my research and came to a meeting at the expense of my personal time, where I heard that the village trustees agreed to step back and form a community task force, then why am I here again? I believe this is precedent setting for you to reverse your decision. Will all decisions be handled this way? What is decided at one meeting be unraveled at the next meeting unbeknownst to your constituents? I would urge you to take advantage of the residents that raised their hands and instantly volunteered to be on the community task force regarding the deer population in River Forest. I would like River Forest to keep that $200,000 in our coffers until we do some data analysis to determine 1, do we have a problem? 2, how do we fix that problem? And 3, how much will it cost? That only makes sound business sense. We are not a cash cow for the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie?
Hi, I'm Annie Wallace. I live at 846 Monroe. Thank you all for your service. And I don't have much more to add to what folks have already said. I would just encourage the trustees to consider that this really isn't, in my view, a black and white issue. A vote this evening to delay signing the intergovernmental agreement is not a vote against a deer cull ever. It is merely a vote to ensure that we revisit the community task force that the Board of Trustees had already unanimously approved would be an appropriate next step, and that we take the time to gather the appropriate data, gather the relevant information, both with respect to the residents' concerns and with respect to scientifically whether there really is a greater population of deer in the forest preserve, how many deer there even are. I think, are there 5 or there 500? No one knows. So how do we know that 50 is the right number year over year to kill? And at what point do we know when we have been successful? Because we're never going to get to 0 car accidents. We're never going to get to a point in time at which we've eradicated all of the concerns that people have around the deer. And so how then do we have metrics to ensure that we've made satisfactory progress? And I think that a community task force would be the very mechanism by which we would make all of those determinations. And so I would just reiterate that voting to proceed with the community task force, or rather just not voting to sign the intergovernmental agreement tonight, is not voting to never cull. It may well be that the community task force ultimately determines that that's where we need to go. And I think those of us who would prefer that that not be the solution will have much greater respect for that being the ultimate decision, if indeed that's what happens, if we feel that an appropriate process has been followed. And I think that this is a sufficiently emotional and divisive issue for this community that I was so heartened in November to see people from opposite sides with different views readily volunteering to come together and figure out a solution. That's the very sort of thing I want this community to support and further and foster, not quash in the interest of moving quickly to be able to kill the deer within this killing season. So I would just really encourage you all to think of it as a pause to allow us to gather the relevant information, as opposed to a yay or a nay for culling, and culling never comes into play again. And I'm this is the one time that I'm making that black and white decision. I would also just reiterate with respect to the contract itself, folks have noted a number of observations. The other one that I would note is the $40,000 that is a deposit isn't just in the first year, it's every year. So we have to pay $40,000 for the undefined work, for all the costs associated with culling of the deer. And then if there's money left over after they've undertaken all that work, we get it back. But that's how it works. So there's no means by which they actually itemize what it is that they'll be doing. So query how we can be confident that they don't cull 2 deer and charge us $40,000 for it, because there's no mechanism by which we can control for that. And the money is out the door, and then we're going to be lucky to get it back. So I would just suggest that not only do we need to be sure that we've gathered the appropriate data and that we're going into this eyes open, and that we've identified metrics by which we can measure success, but also that we think about the fact that if the objective is to move quickly to be able to cull yet this year, there's work that needs to be done in that intergovernmental agreement to better protect the village before it enters into it. Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, John.
First, John Rager, 7837 Greenfield, formerly 847 Keystone. So we've always lived near the Forest Preserve. And I want to say, I completely hate this. I do not like disagreeing with neighbors, and certainly you'll if any of you know me, I'm not the one who goes to the as a host. The only 2 large animals that I know of that you mentioned were coyotes and raccoons. The other very prevalent in the area are deer. So deer carry many have the capacity to carry many more female tick than a coyote or a raccoon. Earlier, when was our meeting last? I have no idea. December or something. I talked about my daughter because I wanted it's a very personal issue, but she didn't leave the house for 4 years. We had no idea what was wrong with her, but she had Lyme disease. She also had something called babesia. It's a parasite that is a tick-borne disease that comes from the black-tailed tick. Over the years, we have had several individuals come to us and say, hey, my individual child is presenting similar traits to your daughter, Olivia, which she has presented. So I thought I'd share a few numbers. 7 times, 7 people who live within 2 blocks of the Forest Preserve have come to us. 7 for 7. 7 for 7 have tested positive for either Lyme disease or babesia. And, we could say we could need more numbers, and I agree. I will say I'm an actuary. I do statistics for a living. I have no idea what data we're gonna accumulate. We're a small community of 11,000 people. It's not very credible, but 7 for 7 is. So I do want to mention that. I completely hate fighting about this. I also wanted to mention the use of the word slaughter the deer. Listen, I'm not into killing animals. Anyone knows me, I'm actually a vegetarian. But I would venture a guess the vast majority of the people in the room here eat meat. So you're okay with slaughtering a cow that you never saw the light of day, and then eat it, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. This venison would be donated to the, as I understand, the Beyond Hunger food pantry. Yeah, so it's not a bad proposition. I will say, if we don't do anything, my own personal opinion, again, it is anecdotal, but 7 for 7. I want to remind you, it will continue. It absolutely will continue, in my opinion. I don't have any stats to back it up. I will also say that I know there are other individuals who have either as an adult or have children that are missing school. They're missing work. Their anxiety, their pain, their exhaustion, constant exhaustion, they don't know what's wrong with them. They haven't been tested for Lyme disease. They haven't been tested for babesia. I would venture a guess a lot of those individuals are sitting with these tick-borne diseases and they don't even know it. That's it. Thank you.
All right, John, thanks. All right. Bob Zimmerman?
Getting old is really hard.
I know. Don't worry.
I'm going to read to you from a Freedom of Information request response I received today at 3:30 today from the Forest Preserve District. I've submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to the Forest Preserve District since mid-December 3 times, to the University of Illinois once, and to the IDNR twice. It's loaded with information which I have offered to share with the village, and my offer was never accepted. But I will just read to you what I submitted and what the response was. And I am a lawyer by training. I'm retired, so I have to translate my own words into English as I'm speaking to you, so please forgive me for failing once in a while. This was the January 13th letter that I sent to the Forest Preserve District. Please reference an email from John McCabe to Jonathan Pape, dated August 8th, 2019, which was provided to me by the Forest Preserve District pursuant to my earlier Freedom of Information request, and that was back in November. In that letter, Mr. McCabe indicated to the village that there was a survey of the population. We learned later, and I've learned again today, there has never been a survey of the population. And this is coming from the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, not from the Village of River Forest. The representation made to our board and to the staff of the village is that it was based on a survey of the population. And I'm being told by a woman named Rhonda Johnson, FOI officer of the Forest Preserve District of Cook County, that there is no such survey. Now, she told me this back in November, December, and I reiterated it in the second request. I said, since then, have you gotten a survey? Her answer back to me was, we don't have that survey. Now, Eric has told us that they've been advised that there's ecological and flora damage in the forest preserve. And that's the basis of the decision that deer must be killed. And I'm going to read to you paragraph 5 of my request. I asked for copies of all data and documents prepared by the Forest Preserve District or provided to the district from any third party starting back in January of 2010 to the present date, describing, supporting, or relating to any ecological or biological needs or damage to the Forest Preserve District preserves. And on these preserves, we're talking about Thatcher, Thomas Jefferson, and Grand Army of the Republic. So from north all the way down to Madison along the Des Plaines River. Or damage to or degradation of the flora of those preserves, biodiversity needs of or damage to those preserves, in each case caused by or resulting from or as a consequence of habitation of those preserves by white-tailed deer. And also, please tell me about any forestry management improvements or maintenance of the preserve pertaining to or resulting or as a consequence of the occupancy of those preserves by the deer? The answer is we don't have anything. We have no such documents. So the Forest Preserve District told me they have no survey. They have no assessment. They have nothing to prove up ecological damage, damage to the flora. So we don't have any evidence presented to you that, or that can be presented to you by the Forest Preserve District that there's a survey of the population or that there's been an assessment or survey of the flora and fauna. Now, another thing that I did is I learned from one of the other responses from the Forest Preserve that they told Jonathan that there's a more robust study out there that's being prepared by the Prairie Research Institute of the University of Illinois. And I thought, well, maybe that's where the survey is. So I wrote to them. How about sending me this survey that I've been told exists? A robust survey of white-tailed deer only. Their answer is, and it's a helpful answer if we're thinking about long-term, not short-term, the answer is we can't give you that request because we're going to rely on an exemption from the Freedom of Information obligation we have. And here's the exemption. It says Section 140F exempts from disclosure preliminary drafts, notes, recommendations, memoranda, and other records in which opinions are expressed or policies or actions are formulated, except, and then the exception doesn't apply. It said if somebody blew it and talked to the press, we have to show you that document. But it's preliminary assessment, meaning they may be studying this. And Mr. McCabe, when he talked to Jonathan, may not have been making that up. He could very well have been referring to this. And if it's out there, and the Prairie Research Institute is highly regarded, I'd love to see that study. And I think anybody that's studying this issue right now would love to see that study, because it's probably more than just Thatcher Woods. My guess it's covering the 70,000 or 90,000 acres of the Forest Preserve District of Cook County. So I have all sorts of stuff, all sorts of documents from these various agencies that tell me that nobody knows what they're doing. Now, a final thing, they keep giving us the number 50. I started practicing law in the days of whiteout and IBM things where the thing would show up in front of above the keyboard. Pre-honest word processing. Word processing can kill people. It used to drive me crazy with our associates. Don't do that. Go back and look at the document. And I believe what the applications that were submitted by the Forest Preserve District to the IDNR for permits to kill deer are the victim of word processing, because every one of them asked for 50 tags. A tag is what you put on the dead deer. Okay. Glenwood Zander Forest Preserve, 4,248 acres, 50 tags. Tinley Creek, 4,248. That's a real word processing error. You can't possibly have the same acreage. 50 deer, 50 tags. Palos Sag Valley, approximately 14,000 acres, 100 tags. Salt Lake, 1,300 acres, 25 tags. Bemis Woods, 1,270 acres, 25 tags. Ned Brown, 3,700, 50 tags. River Trail, 2,900 acres, 50 tags. And then I see Thatcher Woods, 245, 40 tags. But these other ones have 4,200 with 50. You can't even get the acreage for Thomas Jefferson and the GAR. Enough. They don't know what they're doing. The task force can help. And if you proceed with it without the task force, you're driving this community apart. And I know, based on what I'm hearing tonight, that that's not necessary. Where are you, John? Did you leave? He was a neighbor. I know his daughter. And I told you the story about my tick problem. I don't want to get mad at that guy. I like him. See?
Thank you, Bob. Okay.
Give the village residents a chance to help you.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Bob. Yeah. Okay, Kathy O'Leary.
Hi, I'm Kathy O'Leary. I live at 1138 Ashland. I have nothing to add other than I am opposed to culling the deer right now and would encourage further research, discussion, community, task force, whatever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Angela? 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 Cougar? No? Oh, that was Chamber. I'm sorry. Okay, that concludes. Anybody? Yes, I'm sorry. If anybody wants to speak, please, and just say your name.
Yeah, Carla Graham White. I've lived at 743 Park for 34 years, and yes, there is an enormous increase in deers. I've walked dogs for 34 years. Used to see them behind the railroad tracks, occasionally between Oak and Chicago. Believe me, they're not staying there anymore. They are all over the 700 block, in the front yards, in the backyards. I hope some of you have read the data that the village published today. I don't know if John, if you did that. The number of calls since 2017, 29 calls about deer. These are not mostly deer sightings. These are mostly people calling in about injured deer, dead deer in their yards, deer who are blocking a garage and a woman can't get into the garage, a man, the son of a woman in a wheelchair who could not get around a deer blocking their front door. 29 sightings in 2017, approximately 50 calls, not sightings, calls to the village when the police go out and they state exactly what the situation is. Approximately 50 calls in 2018, approximately 50 calls in 2019, and I believe when this was published earlier this week, last week, 2 calls already in 2020. So anybody who thinks there aren't more deer should look at that. Open it. Look at the number. Those of you who don't worry about Lyme disease for yourself or your dogs should worry. And if nothing is done, either with, I have not heard any solutions to this problem. I've heard about changing out your landscaping with deer-proof plants. I garden mostly with native plants. They eat the native plants too. They'll eat anything that there is in the winter. 8-foot-high fences, not a 6-foot-high fence. A deer jumps, I don't even know if my arm reaches 8 feet. They jump that high. And that is the only thing. I dreamed about putting a medieval wall around River Forest and a moat. And some people suggest putting like 3 feet between your forested areas and your patio so that the ticks don't get in there. This is nonsense. Please give me a solution other than culling the deer. If you can do it, I'll take it. But at this point, I would just ask the village, spring is coming sooner than you think. Is it possible that you send out an alert in the spring to advise the residents to check on what to do about Lyme disease, the best preventions, how to pick off ticks? The CDC, I looked at it today, has a very good, it's about a 2-page long thing on ticks and what to do about them. Maybe you do want to go around with DEET on you all day long. Certainly, mosquitoes around, that's good too. Otherwise, I don't know what to say. Oh, and also to advise the residents to make sure their dogs are protected. They have a blood test to make sure whether the antibodies against the ticks are there or not. Now, your vet can advise you whether to get vaccinated. You can get the pills or you can use the topical frontline. But please tell the vet residents that there is a problem. If there's 7 people in this village already who have, 1 or 2 of those tick-borne diseases, that's a lot. I think at the last meeting I said If there were 4 cases, and that was the number of Lyme diseases, if there were 4 cases of measles, you know the village would be screaming.
Yeah.
And 7 cases of tick-borne disease. It's not a fun thing. I know people who have it, and it's horrible. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Anybody else? Okay, Mary Rose and then Gigi. Thank you.
Hi, Mary Rose Smith. I live at 1220 William. We've talked about the tick-borne diseases. I've seen a tick on my dog. My dog takes the pill every month, and I've still found a tick on my dog. So I'm very concerned about Lyme disease. I didn't realize how prevalent it was, but I'm most concerned about the car accidents. And I haven't reported any, but I've missed a deer twice, and my daughter's missed a deer. And one of her friends has. So, I mean, at what point as a village, we have to get in front of this before a fatality occurs. I'm all in favor of the task force, but let's call the herd first. Let's call it right now so we can get in front of the Lyme disease and get in front of the car accidents, and then do some research as well. I think we have to do both at the same time, but I think we have to move forward quickly. I don't think we can wait for a task force in months and months and months. I would like it to happen right away, as far as I'm concerned. I think the deer are dangerous.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Yep. Gigi?
Hi, I'm Gigi Hoke. I live at 1037 Forest. Mary Rose, you made my point perfectly. I do think that there is a compelling reason to move forward sooner rather than later. I am the parent of 2 children with Lyme disease. One of them was one of the 7 that the Ragers identified and said, get this kid tested for Lyme disease. And I went, what? Oh, come on. And sure enough, yes, he had Lyme disease. We did not catch it early enough so that antibiotics would work. He is in the permanent stages of Lyme disease. It is something he will always suffer from. At that point, I told this story in December. We had my whole family tested. We had my dog tested, and my little guy, who was 7 at the time, also had Lyme disease. We do, and to the other lady's point, I was going to suggest as well some Lyme disease education, because we do live so closely with these deer, and no one is suggesting that we eradicate all of these animals and all of the wildlife that might bear ticks. But let's be on the forefront of this, because Lyme disease has spread from the east coast of our country and is quickly spreading through the Midwest. It's now prevalent in Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan, and it is going to become more and more of a problem. And the issue is that the tick nymphs can be microscopic. On both of our boys, there was never the bullseye rash. There were never the flu-like symptoms. There was nothing to tell us, to indicate to us that they had been exposed to the bite of a tick, whether, from whatever animal that they were exposed to. And I do firmly believe they were both exposed in our yard in River Forest. My bad. I planted deer-resistant plants when I bought our current home. We've lived in River Forest, I've lived here 23 years. We moved into our second home in River Forest. I got rid of everything the deer were eating because I knew, and planted native, drought-resistant, deer-resistant plants. Well, the grasses, the beautiful prairie grasses I planted, that's exactly what I think exposed my kids to Lyme disease. They're planted under our basketball net. The basketballs, we have 2 boys that have it, and the girls don't have it. They're going into the grasses to retrieve the basketballs. And I think maybe that's how they got exposed. Those grasses are coming out this year. So I do think that there's a compelling reason to do this quickly, because this is a horrible disease. We don't want any more children playing edge soccer practice in Thatcher Woods or in their own backyards getting this disease. We don't want dogs getting this disease. And God forbid, we don't want anyone with lower immune systems like our seniors getting this terrible disease. So education to the public about what it is and how it can be prevented, I also gave up using DEET years ago because it's bad for the environment and it's bad for our endocrine system. I'm back to using deep woods off. And it's a trade-off. You want Lyme disease or do you want to use the DEET? And I was using more natural products. I'm back to using that. So just education to the public of what we can do to prevent it. And I do think that, reducing the herd will help our River Forest residents stay healthier. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gigi. All right. Okay, that concludes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. If you don't mind stepping to the podium and telling us your name, please.
Hi, everybody. I know we're all at our wits' end. My name is Julie Armstrong, and I live at 121 Thatcher. I don't think I've heard anyone speak from Thatcher, so felt compelled to get up. I've lived in River Forest for almost 8 years now, but I've lived in Oak Park River Forest for 15, excuse me. I love this area, and I love it because it was near Forest Preserve. So that's kind of what comes with it sometimes is animals and trees and things. So I really want to thank my neighbors that came here with a voice and a lot of data that I didn't have anything prepared. I came to listen because I wanted to learn about what was going on. I wanted to understand both sides of the argument. So I appreciate both sides getting up, and I appreciate you all in your service. But I really, from everything that I've heard this evening of an hour and a half now, I don't think we have enough information. And I'm a mother of 2 boys myself, 11 and 7. My 11-year-old wanted to come with me tonight and speak for the deer. He did. And so as a mother, I hear you, right? But I don't have any information that says that it's because of these deer specifically and them playing in the yard. Both my kids play edge. I just don't have that information. And that scares me that we'd be making big decisions to terminate animals when it doesn't feel like we have a lot of information. So I want to thank everybody really for being so prepared tonight with all the information, because I've found it just absolutely fascinating. And I really hope everybody's listening to everyone and we get to a good decision tonight. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Julie. Yep. All right. Anybody else around the table? Okay. Very good. Well, that concludes then our public comment. So what I'd like to do now is ask our village administrator, because I know there's a lot of comments about what the village administration has done and what information and so forth. So I think it's real important to have Eric and John kind of give us a presentation on where this started, kind of chronicle events, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
Happy to do that. And certainly want to thank everyone for their feedback and their comments and the respectful dialogue this evening. This year, the village had received calls and emails from residents regarding the overabundance of deer in the village. That contact led to a meeting, as you well know, on June 24th of 2019. A presentation was made at the request of many residents voicing their concerns. A representative from the IDNR was in attendance, and the vast majority of the crowded room was in agreement that there was an overpopulation of deer. Fast forward to November 25th, 2019. On that date, the village board considered an IGA from the Forest Reserve District regarding wildlife management. At that time, it was discussed to hold off on the IGA and to otherwise discuss a task force to consider issues relating to the deer. Go to December 9th, about a month ago at that meeting, to discuss the formation of a task force. There was additional discussion from trustees to move forward with the IGA while also considering a task force. Village staff has been working towards mining data through additional resources to find more data for you. And while none of these data sets are ever perfect, one interesting data set that I find interesting relates to deer removals from public works. And as you can see on the information that we posted online, in the last 3 years, that number has increased from 4 in 2017, 8 to 2018, and 15 in 2019, and 9 removals in the last 4 months, 4.5 months, excuse me. These instances are caused by dead deer in the roadway, which have been either severely injured, killed, or in some cases are euthanized by our police officers, or in instances where there are dead deer on private property and residents will call the village staff asking for assistance because there typically are very few other resources that will handle that work. In addition to the removal from public works, there are numerous calls for injured or sick deer that have meandered into our residential areas. And I only share that information because as we talk about the humane components of this proposal, having several injured deer scattered among the community certainly isn't in the best interest of the deer either. And so other municipalities have worked on other programs, their own programs, and have had a lot of success. Northbrook and Elk Grove Village were two communities that created their own programs and applied for their own permits. And there's a distinction there. So while they are successful, let's be clear, these programs were administered much differently. It is important to note that these programs were administered all on private property, typically in residential areas. And in the case of Northbrook, all that work was done in-house by police officers and public works employees to keep costs down. This proposal in front of you is obviously much different. Village staff has sent you various documents and letters generated by the Forest Reserves of Cook County addressing many of the questions and comments that have been raised. Their overall management of their land was studied and generated into a report that discusses deer overabundance. And while their prism on deer management is through a much different lens, namely the ecology and plant life, their conclusions, observations, and recommendations in their professional expertise is to move forward with a deer management program. That's been well documented. Such a program would be mutually beneficial to the Forest Reserves and also to the village. One of the pieces that feedback that we've received from these previous meetings was looking at the matter on a more regional basis. The Village of Elmwood Park shares our concerns and has agreed in principle to contributing $10,000, which would also include deer management on the north side of North Avenue. That is done in part because the Thatcherwood complex, as defined, goes from border to border. So it's not like it's centralized within the village limits. So slightly exceeding those parameters is within the realm of reasonability, both from Elmwood Park and the Forest Reserves. And this would lower our commitment from $40,000 to $30,000. One of our three tenets that we focus on relates to public safety, right? So making sure we live in a safe community. When most people hear that comment, we obviously think of public safety efforts, right? Our police officers and our firefighters. But this issue does also fall squarely into that category, protecting the public. And so when I make recommendations to you, it's done with that tenet at the forefront of my mind. With 9 deer removed by our public works crews in the last 4.5 months, I worry about the increased likelihood of a serious accident between a deer and a vehicle. It's for that reason, the professional expertise and recommendations of the Forest Reserve and the information that I've related to you, that I'm recommending that you move forward with the intergovernmental agreement with the Forest Reserves. Should the village board also wish, again, as you've discussed, to move forward with the task force, village staff is prepared to assist where needed.
All right. Thank you, Eric. So I'm going to open it up. There's been a lot of interesting comments, I think, made by the residents, some very good points. And I'll just maybe let the trustees bring them up first. And if you guys don't, I'll bring them up. I guess, I'll just open it up right now to the trustees.
Well, I got to admit I'm confused. The most important paragraph in the letter from the superintendent is the one on, it's the third paragraph on page 2, where he states the Illinois Department of Natural Resources grants population control permits based on a demonstrated need due to excessive damage to property or risk to human health or safety. Biologists and ecologists from the district and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Survey of Vegetation, to ascertain deer damage. Well, I won't read the rest of it, but I read that as saying that there have been 3 different sets of eyes that have looked at this. The Forest Preserve, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and the Department of Agriculture. Do we know on what basis, given that there apparently is no foiable information on what this paragraph speaks to, what did the Department of Natural Resources base their decision to grant the permits due to excessive damage? I mean, that does really confuse me.
Right. And so, one of the things that we've been trying to relate, and we've discussed, and I'll restate this because let me back up 1 second. We talked about the survey. Staff agreed that at that time, we were expecting a survey based on population, right? That doesn't exist, and I think that's well-founded here tonight. The survey then turned into a discussion about the flora and fauna in the forest reserves. And so that is based on their observations, right? So them going out on a regular basis, observing what's out in the Forest Reserve District. And I think what we've heard tonight, and again, I think it's consistent with what we've been trying to relate, is we didn't anticipate any hard data reports, et cetera, coming forward. It was the district going out and observing everything, over a period of time, many of the employees that work there are long-term employees, so it is based on their observations year in and year out. I think I got all your questions.
Well, but I'm still confused. Did they send an email saying, yeah, there's property damage? I mean, what was conveyed to the Department of Natural Resources that justified their decision that there's excessive property damage that warrants the issue of permits?
Right. So if you look at some of the letters, and then you also go back and they look at the reports, a lot of what they look on is the graze lines and looking at where the deer are at and how high that's.
No, I understand.
Yeah, okay.
My question is, where's the document? What pieces of information did they provide to the Illinois Department of Natural Resources to start this process moving? That's the part that worries me. And it could be just
Nothing's gone to the IDNR.
Nothing.
Okay, well then I can't figure out how the three different agencies involved in here made the decision.
They haven't.
No decision.
So if you were to sign the IGA, they have not applied. They have not applied for a permit yet.
We know that.
Right. We've talked about that. They have not applied for a permit. They're not going to apply for a permit until the village signs the IGA, and then the permit essentially is the permit approval is a one-page document that grants them the ability to manage the deer.
So then in the last sentence of that paragraph that I read, the use of the passive is intended because it says it was determined the impacts meet the standards. Is that the Forest Preserve's decision?
That's my understanding, yes. So following what you're saying, Trustee Cargi, following assessment of the Thatcher Wood Complex, it was determined that the impacts to the site meet the standards to warrant management.
So, Eric, I'm confused a little bit, along with Tom, because you say it's a one-page document. I have information from the Forest Preserve of Cook County for each of the other division complexes where they do this work, and the reports are 6 to 10 pages long and have lots of information about flora and fauna and where they were 10 years ago and where they are now. So it looks like they're capturing this information in certain locations, but I can't tell if they're capturing this information in Thatcher Woods, and it'd be good to have that to understand if there's an overpopulation.
Right, and you did share those with me today, so thank you. My understanding, based on what you had sent over, those are reports that are done in other sites in the Forest Reserve where they have ongoing deer management programs.
So
I suspect that, and again, we would have to confirm that, but I suspect the reason that report doesn't exist for Thatcher Wood is because there has been no deer. If you look at the title of those, they all relate to deer management programs.
Okay, so I feel like when we were asking the Forest Preserve, please provide us with data that might support a decision in us determining whether there's an overpopulation, that kind of data would have been helpful if we were going to make a decision about the contract tonight. And I don't have that, so it's harder to make.
Does it exist? I mean, it sounds like it doesn't exist.
Right, but I guess that's what concerns me. Again, I had assumed that all three of these departments had already agreed on this, and maybe that's just because I read the letter too literally. But
that's what we were told.
I think that's what it sounds like that the supervisor had said in the letter.
We were told in November, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources has reviewed the proposed work and issued the Forest Preserve District of Cook County a permit.
Yeah, that's why I read the first sentence as well.
The application was never submitted because we never approved an IGA. So my confusion and question has been, again, to this number that they've suggested, which is supposedly an expert opinion on a certain number to cull, as somebody else pointed out, for our area along River Forest, to now bring Elmwood Park into play. What are their numbers? It looks like each preserve has to have a specific application submitted in order to do the culling. These are two different preserves, so how are we bringing in Elmwood Park anyhow? How are we determining this same number is going to be effective for both locations? And again, I read the blank application that's supposed to go to the IDNR, and to me, if all the information that was provided according to what's requested in the application, this would have been a much easier decision to make. Because it would have been the information we've all been saying we would like to see, and there's no application.
So there's not even a summary within the Forest Preserve of the condition of the preserves?
No.
So, well, and I guess the follow-up question, is that a piece of data that any one of us can get? Does it exist?
Wait, I would assume
No. What? Who said no? Huh? It doesn't exist. So then where do you go with this information if the data that you want to make a decision on doesn't exist? Okay, who gathers it, Frank? But we've already asked that, right? And they said they don't do that. Am I making?
They've done
no.
it in connection with every other application they made in this year.
And
Right.
it's very detailed.
And yeah, it's
Is
detailed.
that before they agreed to it or after they agreed to it?
They do it long before they do it. They started probably 2 years to 4 years prior to culling the herd. And it's part of their decision process. They have to identify what plants they're trying to save or rescue. They do a plant count, they do a browse measurement, they observe the herd, they take counts of the herd. They document the data for the Forest Preserve for 2 to 4 years prior to making a decision on culling a herd. And that is how they also determine what a number is. And then they monitor after they cull, what effect has it had on the plants that they're trying to save, on the habitat in the forest. They have no data on Thatcher Woods. That's what we know. They have not been in there investigating it, documenting it. So this is not a decision for the forest that the Forest Preserve is making to save the habitat in Thatcher Woods. This is the Village of River Forest saying, I've got $200,000, will you kill some deer for me? And they're saying, yeah, we'll kill some deer for you. And now they're trying to backfill the paperwork, just like we're trying to backfill this decision in order to get this done. But it is not the proper way to get things done. It is not the IDNR's recommendation. And he told this to you guys. I've got the emails 3 different times. He came to a meeting, spoke with you guys, told you, don't do this backwards. He warned you that the community was going to rise up and have a problem with it.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I want to make sure that we just have time. Okay, so I want to get back to John and Eric. So you believe that the data that we've been talking about, this report that I haven't seen, or nope. Has anybody seen this other than Mary or Erica?
So these are summaries of deer removal requests at the other jurisdictions, probably more consistent with the work plan that's called for in the intergovernmental agreement.
Okay.
And so the information in here is, in my understanding, is that these management programs at these other preserves have been going on for multiple years, in some case 10, 15 years. And what's that? Okay. So so part of it is the request in the work plan for the upcoming year. Also part of it is the historical information of all the work they've done over time. So it provides and asks for what they're doing in the future, and then also what they've been doing in the past as well.
It is all of the applications that the Forest Preserve District of Cook County has submitted to the IDNR for the 2019-2020 culling season. It's requesting permits for 350 deer at those 7 properties. You're now asking for River Forest to be added in there for 40 deer with none of that documentation.
Okay, thank you, Mary. But I just want to try to, kind of get us to talk here. So
I was concerned when I read the first letter from the Forest Preserve on January 7th.
Katie, can you just hang on? Are you finished with your comment?
Well,
I just want to make sure we're.
Greg, if you could speak to the concerns that were raised about the contract, that's put you on the spot.
Yeah, so the contract says in Section 5B that the Forest Preserve District will work with the village to affirm the work plan agreed to by both parties. So they're going to do what they and the village agree to do. It's true that there's no attachment that has a bullet-pointed list of what's to be done, but they must generate that along with the village per Section 5B. With regard to cost, the second sentence of excuse me, I'm trying to speak.
Yeah,
Please give me that respect, okay? Thank you. The second sentence of Section 6 says that funding provided by the village shall not exceed $40,000 annually. Okay, that is a limitation on the village's financial obligation. So the idea that there's some uncapped amount that the village would owe is not true. It says here that it shall not exceed $40,000 annually.
And the cost incurred in that section is work incurred by the district by third-party contractors, suppliers, or vendors. So it's not for the work for the district.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
we don't need at this point more input from the audience. I
Yeah,
think the
I
village
agree.
president has said that the village board are debating these matters at this time.
Yeah. Well, it's the right thing to do. I mean, I hear you, Frank. So let's just get a chance to talk amongst ourselves, please. Okay. Katie?
I think we've heard about a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of missing information, and the initial letter from the Forest Preserve on January 7th, I thought was written in a very vague and general way that didn't address our particular Forest Preserve land. And now I felt the same way when I read the requested follow-up, the first requested follow-up, and I felt the same way when I read the second requested follow-up that came maybe this afternoon just before the meeting. And now I guess I understand why, because I hear from the FOIA result that there is no detailed information upon which the Forest Preserve can base this request. So I've also heard a lot of offers from residents to work together on a task force, and a lot of optimism and the desire for camaraderie and thoughtful analysis of information. So I would move that we table the motion for the IGA and move forward with the task force.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Katie. And we'll, before we, unless you're saying you wanna have us move on that action right now, I'd like just to hear from anybody else.
I would like to move on it, although I don't really understand the parliamentary procedure about it.
Well, I think
I'll admit that.
Yeah, you'd have to withdraw. And
No,
then
so a motion to table can be made while another motion is pending. So at this time, a motion has been made. So if it's seconded, then there could be a debate and then a vote taken on it. And if the motion to table passes, then the main motion made by Trustee Kargi and seconded by Trustee O'Connell to approve this matter would be tabled.
Okay. But I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to talk, though. I mean, and then if you want a second and we'll table it, I have no issues. That's fine. I just don't want to shortcut anybody's conversation. That's all. So I'll just leave it as that.
So I would like to reference a point in the letter from January 7th as well. And actually, I'll preface that by, if you go through and read the comprehensive plan from the Forest Preserves, it specifically spells out their mission is to protect the land and to restore it back as much as they can to natural plantings, having a balance in the biodiversity of plants, animals, etc. They call out, there is the section about deer management, they call out the fact that they do see an abundance in the population, right? But they also talk about what they've done so far. Obviously, they need to prioritize how and when they can do that culling. And they've determined that there's certain preserves that they see have, in their opinion, a higher success rate, perhaps, in restoring that land. Perhaps its use of that particular land has more value in putting the resources in that particular area. And so they go on to talking about the fact that they, in certain preserves, have already started doing this culling. At the end of that deer management section of the comprehensive plan, it does say that they would like to be able to expand this further, right? And then it ends with saying such an expansion will require developing and initiating an extensive public education and engagement strategy with a special focus on neighboring landowners. What struck me about this is this report was put together in 2014. So we're going on about 6 years that this has been something that they have identified that they want to look at. And so I personally can recognize that in order for them to realize their mission in improving the land, that it may take a broader working with other communities and, having these agreements between municipalities in order for them to realize their goals, which would in fact then realize our goals. But again, understanding that they're perhaps driving that, not necessarily us, that we are in fact working as the team. But then the question I had when I was reading the letter from the 7th is that they acknowledge that they have started doing this ecological restoration in Thatcher Woods, and they've already invested money in this. And there's a part that says the next phase to sustain this investment is to manage wildlife densities at levels that are mutually beneficial to the land and the wildlife populations upon it. If this is potentially already part of their plan, and I get that we seem to be getting it, they're not going to do it. It's only going to happen if we pay for it. It's essentially part of their long-range goals. So this is, again, to me, the confusion of where we're at. And the fact that an application wasn't, in fact, submitted, that the IDNR has not come back approving one way or another, the fact that we don't see that the specific number in terms of culling has been specifically noted, that's where I have concerns about moving forward. I can recognize anecdotally in reading their comprehensive plan that probably culling is the way we're going to need to go. But as many people have said, I think we need to follow the process and be able to manage it, because as I mentioned in November, to just go off of how the Forest Preserve is seeing success may or may not be what residents are seeing in terms of having the same issues that we're hearing complaints about. If we don't have a way to capture that, so if after a year or two, say, residents aren't having these same concerns, right? Why would we want to pay necessarily, unless we have the broader goal of helping the Forest Preserve to maintain, recognize their mission? Why do we as residents want to pay 3, 4, and 5 years of that if we're not seeing the same concerns we had this past spring? That was my concern, without having a way to.
I think that's the way the contract would be cancelable. I think, again,
but if we don't have
you're right.
pieces in place to say how we're measuring success.
Yeah, I think it's always was a plan to look at measuring success. I mean, I think, I'll let Bob talk. I think there's a couple things that are kind of swirling.
So I just had a couple of comments. Number one, I'll give you an update on deer. At 7:15 on Sunday morning, I was coming back from O'Hare, and there were 5 deer at the corner of Thatcher and Division. Saturday evening, as we were going out for the evening, there were 6 deer on my neighbor's lawn across the street. The deer are out there. They're not hiding. They haven't gone to Florida for the winter. They're here. Okay. Now the rain over Friday may have driven some of them out, but it's still there. I guess I'm a little bit frustrated with the fact that I think our village staff made a very professional attempt to gather information, and basically we were lied to, and so that's really bugging me a lot. And so I'm sorry. Well, I mean, according to what Bob stated from his FOIA requests, that by the Forest Preserve. Yes, yeah.
You mean on the survey?
Well, I mean, the references they make in here, it says he wasn't able to get the information, but there is a reference to a survey that was conducted with the Prairie Research Institute. They're making their decision based on that. So they've had to look under the hood, and so they were unable to provide that to us. So just that kind of compilation of misrepresentation on the part of the Forest Preserve District is really bothersome. Because I thought we were working in partnership on this. So I guess my question is that if we go ahead and we sign this intergovernmental agreement, and the Forest Preserve submits this, are we sure that they're going to come back with a number of 40 or 50, again, based on the fact that they've done 40 or 50 over 4,200 acres or 3,800 acres or whatever the number is going to be? How do we get to the real number? And is it the only way to get to the real number is by agreeing to do this, and then they come back and tell us?
So to answer your question, in a conversation Mr. Pape and I had earlier today with the Forest Reserves, that number is 50. They would apply for up to 50 tags.
I think what Bob was asking is how do you know that is the right number if there's no data to support it, right? I think you're saying, if we haven't seen this underlining data, then
could in reality could they? Up to 50. Could they come back? And I don't know how they do it, but they at the end of the day they come back and say we really think the population doesn't need to be 50; it needs to be 20 or 30.
So, Bob, I know in the agreement, and I'll leave it up to the attorney, it's up to. So they may come back in their work plan to say it's 25, it's 30, based on whatever that work plan becomes. Right, and that's really the question, is does the work plan include this document that Mary and Frank are talking about eventually? Does it include that before they start sharpshooting?
Again, reading this.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess that's a question for Eric.
That has to be. I mean, there has to be some justification for the Department of Natural Resources.
What would you, John and Eric, just help us out a little bit? Where do you think? How would this work plan be put together from a project plan standpoint? If you had a signed contract tomorrow, cancelable anytime, right, and you said to the Forest Reserve, okay, we're going to move forward, what would be the next step?
The next step would be to put together the work plan.
And what would you say that work plan is?
The work plan, in my opinion, the things I would ask for in the work plan would be the amount of deer tags, the locations, times, other operational issues related to that. Those are the main components of what I would see in that work plan.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing you didn't bring up tonight, which as a resident on Thatcher, I'm very concerned about, which is the safety of myself and my children living across the forest while they're sharpshooting. And I'm from Kentucky, and I'm a fan of the NRA, but we haven't actually talked about that data.
We might use you. No, it's a great point. And I think Frank actually alluded to it, where in the agreement there would be, costs that would be borne to have police officers and surround the forest preserve securely. I think even Eric alluded to it in his, and when he was reading it, it was other communities decided to don't use professional sharpshooters. They use their cops, which is a little insane. I think it was Elk Grove Village that did that, and I think Northbrook did that. That's why it was more inexpensive. I would personally never consider using our own police officers to do any calling. I would probably vote no for that. But a professional calling process using the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they have a specifically a way of surrounding the woods and ensuring safety.
Yeah, I think it's worth just a look.
Oh yeah. I guarantee you, it would be a very right.
A few things in other states where it didn't go so well. So
hold on.
That was something I meant to say on the podium and I forgot.
Okay.
As part of the IDNR's permit too, they're conditional then on each site.
Talk up.
I'm sorry, as part of the IDNR's permit, they're then conditional on each site too. So somebody from the IDNR would inspect the site as well as approve those shooters at that site as a safe working site.
Yeah.
We've learned that from our conversations.
Yeah, of course, it would be at all, it would have to be secured, and we would look at the work. I would assume as a trustee, a group of trustees would look at that work plan and that security plan to ensure the safety of our community.
I'd like to take this back, though, to the fact that we've received information from our expert at the IDNR, Tim Preuss, who said that he recommends that the village proceed with a task force to collect the data, to survey the residents, to determine resident attitudes, to determine resident complaints and attitudes towards different types of management issues. And he thinks it would be very useful and helpful for the village to have survey data. And he says it doesn't make sense to go ahead with culling this winter and also going forward with a task force to sort the issues at the same time. You do the task force first, is what he said. So I don't know why we keep. Yes.
I didn't. Who was on the call on that?
Well, I heard that from a resident, and
I know.
Just to answer the question that you've asked, I heard that from him over the phone.
Okay.
He
But you
told
talked
me
to
that
Tim.
personally,
Okay.
so I will tell you that he said that.
Okay.
Mhm.
That we should not.
We
move
should.
forward.
It doesn't make sense, is what he said, to go forward with culling this year and then also with a task force. You need the task force data and information and all the resources that a task force can offer first.
How much is this task force going to cost?
Yeah,
We've got residents who are offering to do it.
We have residents that don't know anything about deer management. To do it effectively, you're going to have to hire an expert.
They know a lot more than I do.
Bruce will attend every meeting. He'll provide his expertise. He'll provide resources. He'll provide all of the other community data that other communities have done this. So it's not, we're not recreating the wheel here.
We don't. Mary, I agree with that. I agree. I think Tim's a great guy. He's a state guy, so I don't know. He's pretty spread pretty thin. So I'm with you. He was a nice guy when he was here. I didn't hear that when he was here, and maybe we didn't ask the right question. So I'm not going to suggest that.
Well, I think it's been said that first meeting that the village held when he spoke, I've heard complaints that it was pitched or marketed to be for those who had a complaint about the deer, who thought deer were a nuisance. And so a lot of people who didn't think that deer were a nuisance didn't show up because they didn't think the meeting was for them. They didn't understand the broader context.
But here, I have a,
Yeah. So are we going by the attendance of meetings that we decide things?
But so, Tom, to your point, though, for the task force, I think if Tim is offering his expertise,
I mean, that's what I'm going to
helping
say.
to manage the resources and what to accomplish and help us with determining. I mean, that's what I want to say. Determining our metrics, right? Because if we, decide that accidents are what we want to go by, and accidents go down, but Lyme disease continues, to be at a steady level or rise. We haven't determined what metrics we want to base it specifically, and I think a task force would just.
I'm not disagreeing. I think the task force would absolutely give us metrics that we need. I think the situation we're at right now is, should we stop doing what we're doing and create the task force so we can do the 5-year or 2-year or 1 year? That's what I'm hearing, right? Or do we do the calling, work the work plan for the first year, continue with the task force? Nobody says the task force shouldn't be created, and address people's concern like Lyme disease. I mean, I'll be honest, it's very hard, and I know all you guys, and I've talked to you all. It's very hard to look at someone like Gigi or John or any of you, or Mary or anybody, and say, I understand your pain. I mean, I would hate to have my child to have Lyme disease. And I'm not saying we can prevent it or it's going to be eradicated. I think we talked about it, but it's hard for me, at least, to just ignore that. And and I know nobody is trying to suggest that, but no, I get it, Mary. But I think what we're saying is that, well, just give it 1 more year because we need some time to get the data. And I get that too.
You could have worked on this back in April. Tim first told you guys.
Yeah, Mary, come on.
This is not a discussion.
We
Audience comments are closed.
It should be a discussion because your guys.
Yeah, Mary, we will. But you know what? We're 7 board. I mean, I mean, we're 7 board. I didn't have an email. I don't know. I never got an email. Did you? I mean, we never got emails saying, let's get on this thing right now after Tim, did a presentation in March. All I heard is, when's our next presentation? And it was always with the Forest Preserve. And we were waiting for them to get through their referendum that never went. And because they were spending all their time and energy looking at the referendum. And then they finally said, well, that's not going to go. So we'll come in and we'll talk to you guys and provide you information. And so meanwhile, I didn't get an email from anybody saying we could probably get Tim in right now. So I'll be honest with you. It coulda, shoulda, and I'm agreeing with it. It would have been nice if we started in April. But here we are. And I just want to make sure that we're not ignoring, because I cannot do that. And neither, I know most of you all in this room cannot ignore what our other residents are saying. If this was a measles, if this was whooping cough, this would have been an epidemic. And I would have had 500 people in this room talking about how do we do it at all costs? How do we eradicate or get rid of whooping cough at all costs? So we're not saying that, because we're not saying at all costs. All we're saying is how do we address these issues. And I'll just leave it at that. And I get where we're at. So the question we have to ask ourselves, you know, is Tim going to come and manage this task force? It sounds like he's going to come.
I did not talk to him, so I can't. I'm not going to. I'm not going to speak.
Did he say he was going to manage the task force, Katie?
No, I think that it's being misstated.
Okay.
What I heard the residents say and what Tim said to me also is that he would be willing to come and contribute to it, to provide information. He didn't say he would be running it.
Okay.
Eric, so again, I keep going back to this one sentence because I just can't figure this out. So they need to provide the Illinois Department of Natural Resources with a justification for the culling, correct?
Correct.
And apparently they haven't gathered the data necessary yet for that justification, correct? Otherwise, there'd be a piece of paper somewhere that says this is the justification for the culling.
I think that's the work plan.
Right, and so I don't have the document.
No, you don't need, but
and
the forest preserve doesn't either. So the question I'm going to ask is, those are just two prefaces.
Sure.
The question I'm going to ask is there going to be time if we sign this agreement today to do the culling by March? Because they're going to have to put some time in beforehand to gather the information to justify the culling. And I thought you said that the end of the hunting season was March, or the culling season.
I believe it's typically the end of the March, but they have extended that. Isn't that correct? Yep.
Climate change.
So, in the 2.5 months between now and March 31st, is there even going to be a culling this year, even if we sign the agreement tonight?
They have indicated that they would be able to do that, apply for the permits, and get the work plan and necessary documents put together in time. Yes.
And if that was happening, when would that come back to the board for discussion to look at it?
The way the agreement is structured is that I did not anticipate that the work plan was a document that would come back and be voted on by the board.
Or at least discussed.
That would be something that would be handled administratively. However, if you want it to come back, we can do that.
I think it sounds like we'd like to see the data for sure.
Would the gathering of information be included as a chargeable bill cost to us?
Again, payment for all costs incurred by the district by any third-party contractor, supplier, or vendor.
Service doing it, but it's not.
Correct.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the question is would they be able to provide us the data that apparently I haven't seen it, but it looks like it's a nice report. That would be the report we would need. Is that correct, Eric? Trying to figure it out.
Right. And so the reports that I got this afternoon are reports that they have done. And again, I haven't fully read through each and every one of them, but just in glancing at them, hang on one second, they are request as part of their deer management program for the year. Their site descriptions, overall goals, objectives, and methods. And so I haven't compared these and how they compare from one preserve to the next to see if there's a lot of duplication or if there's individual information specific to each preserve. And then a lot of the information that's also in there is historical. So I suspect a lot of the data points and referenced in the tables are probably ones that have been put together year over year after each year they've done some of that work. Again, that's just my first blush look at that from getting it this afternoon.
Are those documents dated here?
Are they dated?
Yes.
I don't believe it. Just says 2019.
The ones I have are from 2019, 2020
Yep.
season.
But to the point of the work, I mean, is this something that there's a November date on it and they're making a decision in December, or is it something that happened in January? And I mean, they've had some time to work through all this stuff.
It's hard to imagine that they can evaluate the plants under the snow.
I think that's what they like it is the snow.
Yeah, I believe they prefer the snow.
That's what they said. Yeah, that's what
For culling deer, not for
No, I'm talking about plant evaluation.
I meant for culling deer.
I meant for plant.
Okay.
I said it's hard to imagine that they would be able to
they
do the
like it,
plant
probably.
evaluation of these herbaceous plants under the snow.
Understood. I didn't.
Yeah.
We were talking about two different things. The only other thing I would say in this, and just looking at these IDNR permits, these permits are all being applied for around these. This is December. I think there's one in November. Again, these are signed off by Tim Pruce from the IDNR, so he's the one that's consenting to the 40, 50, 100 tags.
Go back so that we all know what you're looking at, because
Okay.
we don't have what you're looking at.
Okay.
So could you, these permits came from what towns?
These did not come from towns. These came from
Areas.
This is part of what Trustee Bachner shared to me that
Right.
someone else had FOIA'd. This is Illinois Department of Natural Resources deer population control permits. They're one page in nature. And we were talking, Trustee O'Connell had asked about the dates, and so I had just gone on here really quick, and these were applied for it and issued in December of 19. This one says continue to monitor and quantify deer browse rates upon native indicator plants and plant communities, evaluate threshold levels of acceptable deer browsing upon indicator plant species, focus efforts on the removal of antlerless deer.
And so, like the IDNR, when they have the application, they have something that's an application cover page that's one page. And then they describe what the application should look like, right? And so then they describe all the different parts that you're talking about, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in seeing this, like, this is what I was expecting.
Right. And my question to Eric, and I guess maybe it's your question too. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that a report you get prior to signing an agreement, or is you get the agreement and then you work the work plan, and that's the work product?
Correct. The way what is proposed is that you would sign the IGA. The IGA calls for an annual work plan that typically would take place in October. Obviously, this one would have to happen sooner. And then that work plan is agreed upon, and then that work is followed forward.
Okay. So it's not that we don't have this information; it's an information, and I think we've been actually told that by you, is that there is no application because we never signed anything. So it sounds like once you sign something, then it creates this work plan and all this other work. Because why? I mean, I know it sounds a little kind of crazy, but I guess they wouldn't do the work unless there's some
But again, initially
ability.
we were told it was approved. We were originally
Yeah.
told it was approved.
I mean, I don't see how. In looking at this,
right, and
they actually counted the stems of plants in this area that they were going to. I don't see how they're going to put together the qualifications to get these permits if they're basing it on habitat conditions, because they can't currently assess the habitat because it's winter. I don't see how they can do this. As I just read this, because they're talking about the number of plants that are eaten, and I don't know how you can tell what the number of plants are eaten when there's no plants growing. So I mean,
if they can't do it, then
yeah, I mean,
you
that's
don't move
the concern
on.
that I have.
Well, no, you don't move on.
Keep going.
No, I understand that, but I'm concerned about our partner, to be honest with you. Because the way this letter is written, and I didn't do as much research as everyone else apparently, but the way this letter was written, I was under the impression that this has already been signed off by the IDNR and the Department of Agriculture. Because in the section that justifies this culling, they talk about the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture. So I'm concerned about the way this letter is written, because it certainly led me to the wrong conclusion. I was prepared to back the initial, what Rez had proposed last time, because the Forest Preserve had told us in an earlier letter that there was evidence of habitat deterioration, which is a fair way of inferring that there's overpopulation. And then I read this letter, and it said that, as I read it, the IDNR and the Department of Agriculture both agreed that there was habitat degradation. Now I find out that's not true. And so maybe blame me for the way I read the letter, but I looked at this as I said when I started, there were three eyes that looked at this and agreed that there's overabundance of deer. Now, anecdotally, I think we all know there's an overabundance of deer, but we can't just go based on our own impressions. I'm just concerned about the Forest Preserve, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I just don't know how they're going to get this necessary data to the Department of Natural Resources, because they're relying on habitat, but the habitat is currently under snow. So.
And they may not. Okay.
Well, but they should have told. They're telling Eric that they can do this.
But here,
March
I mean,
31st.
I hear you, and I'm not. And I think it's an interesting situation we're in. Either you say we give the opportunity to the Forest Preserve to see what they give us back. I mean, because we don't know until we see what they will eventually tell us, to address all the other issues that the residents are bringing up, like Lyme disease and increase in, dead deer. I mean, those facts are you can't dispute those, right? You can't dispute what our residents are talking about with Lyme disease, and I don't think you can dispute, how many dead deer we pick up. I hear you that we have to figure out, is it worth it, and wait to get a full report, if that's what is required. Which I think we're going to get a full report regardless, but maybe don't know.
And that's where there's so
You don't know.
much like question mark. That
Right.
it's like it's getting really frustrating that we're still like pushing the decision here when there's a motion on the floor. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to say that because
Yep.
like it just seems like there's a lot of confusion across the trustees, which doesn't make me confident in any decision, good or bad.
I hear you, but it's we've been talking about this for this is our fourth time, so I hear you. It does definitely look like it's a little bit of a confusion. I'm not. No, you weren't here last time. We talked about it.
Last time was the third time.
No, this is our fourth time. No, we did it in March. Did it in November. We did it in December. Yeah, or whatever the beginning meeting was. November, December. This is our fourth. Now I can't count. That's our fourth. If we all feel uncomfortable that we're not going to get the proper information from the Forest Preserve and the IDNR, that's the decision that the group needs to make.
I'm going to come back to this letter because it just, if the browsing pressure on native indicator plants exceed threshold levels based on what would be expected to be present on the site based on its size, habitat, and other factors, then a permit is granted.
Okay, so why don't we do
How
this?
are they going to determine the browsing pressure in the middle of winter?
It doesn't seem like we got a lot of struggling going on. It's late at night. Let's table it. Who's seconding the table?
Well, can I ask, could we approve this but then have another trigger after?
No.
Hey, it's not your vote. Eric, Greg.
Well, we got a trustee
I have
talking.
a question. Can we approve this but still have a separate trigger after we get determination by DNR whether or not to go forward?
Sure. You could make a recommendation that we would bring back the agreement was approved by the county, the Forest Reserve Board, subject to attorney review. And so if there is an additional language or something you wanted to add to the IGA, you have the ability to do that, and we can bring that back to the Forest Reserve.
I think it's. Go ahead.
Or Eric's part of that is we have the right to terminate. Would we have the right to terminate prior to the next step?
Before you spend any money.
In your
So
term.
basically, we want to review the work plan, right? So
Right.
we're going to sign the IGA, and then we have the ability to approve the work plan. And if we don't approve the work plan, the document then becomes null and void.
Here, I'm just gonna make a decision here, guys. I hope you don't mind. I know it's not gonna be. I think we're trying to figure this thing out on the fly. I think you're right. I think it's best that we table this conversation and we really do look at a comprehensive plan. I don't. I think the task force is great. It should be an adjunct task force to what we need to do with the Forest Preserve. And I think we should put it together. But right now, I think there's just too many questions and a bit confusion, which I don't disagree. I hate to say it, but I see it as I don't want everybody to walk away here thinking, what the heck just happened. I much rather, if the people who are affected by Lyme disease, if the people who are out there who have hit a deer and have gotten hurt, we hear you. That's what I want to say. We hear you. We want to solve this problem, and we want to do it in the best way we know how. And I'll get to your rest. And we've got a lot of great, smart residents. I just hope Katie's right. I hope we're going to work together to do what's right for their community, for the health and safety of our community. I really do, and I think we are. So I would be in favor of tabling it and moving on, and getting this right and getting it back and building a task force. Unless you guys outvote me. So go ahead.
Well, I guess I wanted to add, I'm not against the task force, but I know we're hearing that we need to survey and get more results. The problem I have is that this is about, I think it's the 5th meeting, because we had a meeting before the June meeting that we were hearing this issue. And frankly, I'm getting exhausted myself because I'm hearing from residents who just say, I want to cull the deer for a number of reasons. Whether they just want to have their property with no deer whatsoever, or they are concerned with the Lyme disease. We have the other spectrum of people who are saying that they don't want to cull the deer. We've always been hearing probably, I almost say, an equal amount on both sides of both the viewpoints. I think one resident raised the issue of an analogy of a roof leak and bringing contractors to come in, and they were giving different recommendations. The problem is that once the roof is leaking, people want it resolved. They want to fix that leak. And I'm afraid that we're going to keep pushing this back and pushing it back, and it's going to cause a problem. I'm not saying we don't table it, but let's not continuously table this out. And I do agree with a number of residents who are saying we're just dividing the community because no one's making a decision.
Right.
And I think we got to step up to the plate.
I agree.
One way or the other.
Here.
I mean,
and I think that is, yes. And we will. I guess, so let's round this table. Let's make a decision right here and now that if we table it, what will be our next step other than putting together a task force, which is on our next agenda item? What do you want to do to ensure that, is it only the task force, or is it you all here getting together and figuring out with Tim and others what this work plan ought to be like?
Well, I think what I had proposed was tabling it and moving forward with the task force. And, I have very little experience with this kind of thing, but like a commission, a commission, looked at we had a problem with bees. And the commission looked at whether or not people should be able to keep bees. And they interviewed experts. They talked to neighbors. They talked to the village about ordinances and how do you, alert neighbors and thus and such. And they came forward to the village board with a proposal, and the village board accepted that proposal. So perhaps we need to, let a group of people discuss it and, discuss all these different elements of it and come forward with a proposal.
And we will. And I think that's the next agenda item. But I think around the table we have to, the different than bees, we have a health and safety issue.
Bees, people were concerned about that being a health and safety issue too.
Yeah, but it wasn't a major health. It wasn't 7 and 7. It wasn't 2 children. I mean, people got stung and there was issues, and we could have easily wiped them all out. But we did address it. It wasn't a health and safety as big as this is. So I hear you, and we'll use the task force to do it. But I think it's our responsibility around this table to say, what are we going to do?
I think if you table it, you've effectively tabled it for the year.
I agree.
If we don't do it now, we're not going to do it this year.
That's why
I think if we do it now, we're not going to do it.
I'm throwing it out to you all. If you decide you don't want to do it this year because you feel uncomfortable about the data that you don't have from the Forest Preserve, okay. If you feel like you have enough and you think the work plan will create that data that you need, okay. I just think we leave tonight and we talk about the next item, which is the task force, then we have to have some idea of what that task force will look like. I mean, I know Mary gave us a nice review, but it's our responsibility. I hate to say that, Ascald, but it is. We need to govern. We need to govern. That's what you elect us to do. And we want to govern in the right way.
So I would propose, along with Katie, doing the same thing, tabling the IGA. And I don't think that they'll be able to give us a document or information or data enough to do a culling and have us feel good about that in the 2019-2020 season. I think we should establish a task force and have those metrics identified that the community wants to make sure that we are working towards.
Okay. So that's what we need to do, that latter piece. The tabling is easy.
Yeah, and so
right.
If Mary has proposed a way that task force would look like, I'd love to have that and maybe use that as the template.
Okay, all right. That's just
for us to have a starting point.
I would like to ask the question, okay, of the Forest Preserve District or whomever is, let's assume we sign this thing today. What does this look like? And let's see what information they gave us back on that, and what their thought process is. And that's not to say what we're going to do it or not, but I think we need to use. If we decide we're going to table and we're not going to move forward, I still want the answer to the question, because we're going to be in a situation 12 months from now or 36 months from now or whatever it's going to be. What does that process look like? So, I mean, just by us signing an agreement, it's kind of like, a little bit of we're buying the car, but we don't know what the options are. So I'd like to know how, if you call them tomorrow and say, hey, we're going to sign this thing, or if we sign this thing, what does this look like? Can we get it done this year?
But Bob, why didn't they do that already?
Because it sounds like to me, what Eric is telling us is that it's kind of, I don't want to use the term, it's kind of a quid pro quo. Is you got to sign this thing in order to get the information.
But I think we asked for the information.
No, but I think what they're saying is the work plan, and they're not going to prepare the work plan until they have it.
Okay, so did they tell you what that work plan would look like in these past several months that we've been talking about this?
So generally speaking, as I mentioned before, my understanding of the work plan are the things that we talked about, right? The quantity of the deer, the location of the deer, the security around the deer, and around the perimeter of where all that work is done. Those general operational issues are things that are going to come back and be part of that work plan.
Go ahead, Bob.
And I heard that, but again, I'm looking for a little more specificity on this. And I realize that they're going to spend some money to put this together or whatever. But how does this relate to us?
Okay, so Bob, we get that. I think we all get that. We get that. We get what Tom is saying. I think we get. But right now we're at the juncture of saying, are we prepared to sign? It's not sign, but agree to this IGA. If we're not prepared to do that, which is okay, we could table it, and then, we as elected officials can continue down that road, but it would be, for the following year. We could do that. I mean, not to say we don't need the task force. I think we need the task force for the long term, like education. We talked about, wouldn't it be nice to educate people on Lyme disease? Wouldn't it be nice to educate people on what kind of plants they should have? I think absolutely, we'd love you to have that information. But I think we got to do this. We got to do the IGA. We got to get this right to understand it. And if it means we've got to ask, it's more different questions, then we got to find that person that can help us ask those different questions. If we're not getting them through our own administration, that's all I'm saying. I don't know what else. I don't know how to move forward on this particular situation. It's got to be us that wants to look at this IGA and say this is something we ought to do or not, with the data that's appropriate. And if it doesn't exist, then that tells us something different, or we never can get it. That tells us something different. Right. So that's my proposal. We can table it. We could say that this is our role to continue to. I'm just trying to get some consensus here. Our role to, find out if deer calling is the right thing based on information that we need to gather from these appropriate departments. IDNR, Forest Preserve, U.S. Agriculture. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. But I think we have to do that. We, the board, and we, the administration.
May I ask, it looks like everyone's really interested in his work plan. If we were to just pay to get that done, what would that be, Eric? Do you have any idea?
I do not.
No.
Okay.
But
I'm just
maybe
trying
that's
to
a great
move.
question.
I'm just trying to move this along.
It would be forced for them to do that. They're not going to.
Correct, right, because it's their permit.
Okay.
We need an expert.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think we need to hire an expert.
I think we need somebody that helps us, or
without emotion,
right.
And give us advice.
Well, and I think to actually, there's so many different departments in this, state. There's so many different people that have so many different opinions. All right, so that's what I propose. We could table it and then take it on as our action as a group of trustees and say, who do we want to hire to help the administration?
I just want to clarify my understanding of the Cook County Forest Preserve application and then separately the work plan, because when you look at the when you look at the IDNR application, it has attached to it guidelines for the application, and the guidelines say that the application should include quantifiable, measurable objectives which are critical to assessing the success of the management program. Site description, including attempts at deer management on the site and plant restoration activities, including timing, acreage, and documentation of the problem, detailed quantitative and qualitative information, including plant monitoring, number of deer damage complaints, etc. And so all of this is not the work plan. This is all part of the application that they're saying that they will prepare and submit as soon as we sign this IGA. It's not a work plan that goes later.
No, we don't. Well, I don't think we know that for sure.
Well, it's the IDNR's directions for filling out the application.
Would be contracting with the Forest Preserve, and they would do right. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
And they then apply to the IDNR.
Right,
But
Right. So my point is, you guys missed it.
Work plan, that
Yeah, we
information.
need that work plan to get that information.
But this is supposed to be part of the application that has to be. They're saying that they will file.
That's why.
Right.
Well, it could not. That's a good point. But it's also that's why there's an application not done, because they don't have that information.
Okay.
So what do you want to do?
There's a motion.
Yeah, so
No,
at
I mean,
this
what-
point, so from a parliamentary perspective, if there's a desire by trustees Cargi and O'Connell to withdraw their pending motion to approve the IGA, they can withdraw, or a motion to table can be made and seconded. Previously, you suggested making the motion. It wasn't clear that you did, so it could be done at this
I
time.
move that we table the IGA and that we move forward with a task force.
And I said,
Okay, which is a little bit different than what we talked about.
I thought we were going to table it first and then go to talking about the task force.
Right, and so the vote to table requires a 2/3 vote, which would be 5-7 to pass.
So yeah,
And it's not debatable, so a vote has to be taken at this time.
aye. Okay.
I'm sorry, is there a difference between withdrawing and tabling?
Yes, tabling means that in order to have it come back, a motion has to be made to remove it from the table at a future meeting date, which is an extra procedural step that we'll track with staff.
Okay, so repeat. So your motion is to table it and then go to the task force.
It would just be tabled. She can only make the motion to table it. She
Oh.
can't make the other motion.
Well, I think table is
Right. Yeah.
okay.
So you're just table.
Just tabling it.
If I'm told that I can't also move to create the task force, then I'm just looking to Greg.
Yeah,
because I don't understand the parliamentary procedure part.
Right,
So
so a motion to table can only place the item for which a main motion is pending on the table. The only main motion pending is to approve the IGA.
Gotcha.
So that's all that you're able to do at this
that's
time.
what I'm doing.
Okay. And if you get it, but I know we can't debate it, but we need to know what they're voting on. So if you vote on that, you table it, and then what's the next?
And then we move to the next item on the agenda. And then the IGA cannot be further discussed at this meeting. It's not up for a vote, rather, at this meeting, because it's been tabled.
And
Unless a motion to take from the table successfully passes.
correct. So someone at a future meeting would have to make a motion to remove it from the table. Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Does that require a 2/3 vote?
I'll check and let you know.
So am I taking a vote or am I waiting?
Good point.
Well, doesn't Tom have to withdraw his?
No.
No.
No, it's
Because,
just
they're tabling.
Katie tabled.
My withdrawal without my consent.
I mean, without her consent, right? His
Right.
consent. I mean, table means it's off.
right. And so a vote of 5 is necessary for it to pass.
5 to 2.
5 out of 7 to table.
All right. I guess we'll take that vote to table it.
Trustee Bachner.
Yes.
Trustee Cargi.
No.
Trustee Vasquez.
No.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
No.
So fail.
Yeah, it fails because it cannot
Motion
achieve
failed.
5 votes. So the main motion to approve the IGA is still on the table at this time.
Okay, so since you two, what would you like to do with this
I
IGA?
would like to condition, I would like to approve or vote to approve the IGA with the condition that we can terminate it after the statement of work is done. So that it's reviewable by this board and subject to the approval of this board, the statement of work.
Okay, and, okay. How does this, yeah, how do we do that with, I want to make sure.
So in order to amend the motion to approve, Trustee Kargi would propose his amendment, and if Trustee O'Connell agrees, then the amended motion is before the body. If Trustee O'Connell doesn't agree, then Trustee Kargi would need to have a second, and then a vote would be taken on the amendment.
So just so before we go, what do you want to, I just want to make sure I understand that what you're asking.
Basically, adding a provision to the contract that says that the statement of work is subject to the approval of the Board of Trustees. Because I assume that statement of work is going to contain the information that will be necessary to get the permit.
Statement of work is separate from the application?
No, but before we go forward, I would like to at least keep the possibility of this moving forward. And if we table it, we've lost it for the year. So what I want to get from the Forest Preserve is what they're going to give to the Department of Natural Resources that justifies the permits.
Right now, I think, I want my, I'm just going to say it, because it's late. I think we should just withdraw your motion in second, and we take this up as a next meeting, and we keep working through it until we get it right as a group. We're going to lose this year, we get it, but it sounds like we're going to rush it anyway, and maybe the Department of or Forest Preserve and IDNR probably wasn't going to get us the information that we needed. I mean, you will, and I'm glad you cited that. So that was a great. Thank you, Tom.
All right, I'll withdraw my motion.
As long as Trustee O'Connell agrees.
Okay. Great. So we withdraw it. We'll take it up at the next meeting again. We're not going to call this year, so don't walk away and say, "Oh, they're still calling." We're just going to discuss it as a group of trustees and myself to say what is it that we want to do on this new agreement, and that's it. All right. Okay. Let's move on to the next, then the task force, which is really another important.
Okay.
No, we did not table it. He withdrew his motion, so no action tonight. Nothing happened. So we will want to continue talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I could vote if there was a tie. Yeah, but in that particular case, that was a table. It needed to be 5. Mm-hmm.
That's good to know. We can't get.
Yeah, where's the task force? We're putting the task force to stay here. There goes our task force. Okay.
Oh, there's so much for.
So much. All right, so where's our task force? Jerry, are you gonna be our task force? Come on up here, Frank. I gotta see you. Okay, seriously. So our next conversation is forming the task force, which I think everybody around this table wants to do, for sure. No doubt about it. We're just trying to figure out how to make it all work. Okay. Who wants to open it up on the discussion of the task force?
First of all, let me back end it. I think that whenever the decision for the IGA has to be made, I guess for next year in terms of when it starts, we ought to put an end date on what this task force recommendations ought to be so that we get all of that in time so that we can consider what we're going to consider for the following year, whatever that's going to be. So that's number one. Number two, I also think that we ought to have an equal amount of members that are for culling, against culling, not that they're going to decide that one way or the other, but that there's a fair representation of members on that committee, so that it's not slanted to one viewpoint or the other. That's the second point. And the third point is someone is going to have to facilitate that committee. I just don't know who is going to do that. I know we talked about having somebody, obviously Tim is only going to be a resource, so he can be an additional person on that task force, but not, obviously not being able to facilitate it.
So I basically agree with you, Rez, and I heard from Mary, I think tonight, that the Cornell University plan has instructions for how to create a task force, and also that there's a resident who had worked on the D200 Imagine committee or task force, who
Is he
had
still here?
Tim Brenhorst.
Tim, yeah, I was on it with him.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and he had some suggestions about selecting members more for their willingness to work together, listen to each other, cooperate, focus on the end goal rather than advocate for their particular position.
Sure.
I agree with that.
And that was fine. I think.
So we've got a couple of resources.
Okay. D200, what they did is they asked members to apply. It was an application process, so they had to apply and give the reasons why they were applying and interested. And then there was a search committee, a committee that vetted all of the applications and then decided who was going to be on that task force. That's how they did it. So, but, so.
I think initially that sounds like a good idea in conjunction with the Cornell University guidelines to this.
It's a great resource. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are
No, that's
multiple
fine.
communities who have done this. There's multiple case studies on that website and very specific sections on everybody's role in this process and who should be part of the process. It's out there.
Oh,
So I don't
Tim's
think
back.
this is going to be so difficult as
No. I'm not saying it's going to be time consuming. You got to set it up correctly at the beginning. That's what
For
D200
sure.
did.
For sure,
Because
all
if you
of
don't
it.
do that, whatever this committee is going to come out with is not going to be credible to either one. Well, depending on what side we're dealing with, they're not going to find it credible. So we have to be very careful on that in the selection
Absolutely.
process. So
Absolutely.
okay.
So I guess I will ask the question that Rez raised then is there a trustee that would like to work on this?
I am happy to work on it. I will have the caveat that I have some travel plans that will limit me somewhat, but again, I don't think we're not uncovering any great whatever. I mean, I think it's a matter of putting together a survey, managing that. I mean, I think there's things that can be done to get the information that we need and to feel more comfortable in our decision making. I mean, the other thing that the Cornell study talks about is that if this is something that we're going to have to evaluate year to year, this is not a one and done thing. We don't make a decision and we're done. This is going to be an ongoing evaluation of things.
So that might
and
be part of the application. Are you willing to be on this for a 2-year
for
term?
ongoing. I mean, because we're in a unique situation in terms of our application compared to all the other preserves. The forest preserves are submitting those applications for themselves based on their goal that they're trying to achieve in restoring the land, right? We're wanting an application submitted because we have issues within our community. So our goals and what we're looking to address are not going to be the same. So again, an application needs to be submitted. It's essentially going to be based on Forest Preserve's information because that's who's submitting it and that's what they're going to go on.
They will
But
have
in terms
criteria
of a
and we
work
will have
plan and what we're looking for and that kind of stuff in terms of what our community needs, you're sort of talking about different.
You're going to need two processes, right?
You are.
What you're proposing is that you're going to almost go through the process as though you were going to make an application, right? And I think what Tim told Trustee Brennan and others today in part is that part of that is the task force that the IDNR is talking about is one where the municipality is the applicant, right? And that's what Northbrook did, Elk Grove Village, maybe some others. I think you're asking for that to put forward that application, but that's not what's going to be submitted to the IDNR or the county, because the county's still going to have its data, the work plan, the ecological stuff that you're asking for, that we would have to ask for again as part of that. So it's almost like you're applying twice. I mean, you're only applying once. You're going to go through your own process, and then that would just be your information based on what the community tells you, and then that will then have to dovetail with the forces that are still wanting to move forward, and then they're going to put forth an application with their information as well.
I think that raises an interesting question, because in the application it does talk about, what are the metrics they're going to go by. So in that permit application, if it's just overpopulation for fauna and flora, is that the only metric, or are we going to actually list in that permit application, we would like to see vehicle, I think it actually says like vehicle accidents go down as well, in that description of what the application should look like. So I think there are probably more lines than how you're describing it now, but I take what you're saying.
Yeah, and that would be a question ultimately for Mr. Pruce, because Mr. Pruce is the one that's going to approve the permits.
Personally, in my opinion, moving forward the task force or having more information, and because we're doing this through an intergovernmental agreement, it almost seems that the forest preserves should be part of meetings and a resource of information to the committee and provide.
They're not going to do it, though.
But is
Have
Tim
we
then
asked?
going to be the one who approves this?
Yeah, Tim at IDNR would be. And actually, I think the Forest Preserve has every reason to be part of it, because they're motivated for us to do it and pay them twice for it. So
Well, no, not even that, but if in their own
pay
stated
'em
goals
twice.
of their master plan
We're gonna get
is
it.
to be able to expand the culling, which is going to require public education and work with neighboring landowners, it absolutely behooves them to be part of a committee and part of a process that can then be replicated in other areas for them to realize their mission.
If they don't show up.
But it sounds like we're the only, we're the only people in town who aren't getting this. Because the people in Tinley and Palos, they're all part of a program, a management program that they're participating in. And so now and again, based on their lack of cooperation on this, I don't know how you're going to get them to agree to even participate in this. I mean, I agree with you that it behooves them to do it, but given the scope of their mission over however many thousands of acres.
I think we have to stop thinking about whether forest is going to come or not, the forest preserves. I think we have to, like Mary said, she had a nice laid out plan, goals, objectives, what do you want to accomplish and who do we need to work with? And Tim says he's willing to help us with the, whatever resident surveys that we need to do. Right on. I thought what Mary had was good. Am I missing it?
No, I think we agreed on it. I think,
Oh, you
I
did.
think
I was
we
out.
agreed
I'm
with
sorry.
when you were
Went
out
to
of
the
the room.
Okay, I apologize. Well, that's good. At least I'm not completely off sync with you guys. All right. So, well, if we can't get the forest preserve,
Yeah, we will ask.
we'll ask. All right. That's all we can do. Okay. So who asks? I got to get that right.
I can ask if you would like, if you want someone
What
else
is
to ask.
what does the trustees want to do?
why don't we have the task force ask them? The task force can ask Tim Pruce and
How are we
the.
going to build the task force? So let's
Well,
start there.
we discussed this when you were out,
Oh, I'm
out of the
sorry.
room. There's
take a break.
There's a format for it. People apply, and there's certain questions that they have to answer and criteria that's reviewed.
And who's going to ask the questions?
Well, I think we didn't talk about that, but let me just put out maybe the trustees or a handful of trustees or whichever trustees want to work on that part of it, and the village can prepare the application process. I don't think it's going to be too hard, because I think there's a sample. We've got a couple samples, right? One from D200.
Sounds like we have a couple samples,
Yeah.
and Patty has said that barring some travel that she may have, that
She does have trouble.
that she is willing to help initiate this and work on the task
Okay,
force.
great, super. All right. Sorry, I missed that.
A lot of decisions while you walk
Yeah,
out of
that's
the room.
awesome. Thanks. It's great. All right. All right, is everyone good with that then?
But the task force will be comprised of, I mean, the president picks and then we ratify, right? I mean, we're still following that procedure.
I have no idea.
Don't we have to follow that procedure?
I mean, it's not a commission, but
It depends. It depends how you authorize this task force. Do you do it by resolution? In terms of who gets to approve, that's, it depends on how it's created. You set the parameters. Typically, all of your other appointed positions, the village president bring forward the name and you give advice and consent. That's what the Illinois Municipal Code contemplates for advisory bodies. And that would be the best practice to follow in this case as well, I would think.
Although I do think we have the Complete Count Committee, which is just a group of organizations and people.
Right, and I think the Complete Count Committee likely has less structure with regard to making deliverables to the village board. Unlike when the sales tax referendum was being run and other financial matters, the village has put together task forces that have followed, I believe, the more typical appointment routine.
Yeah, and we did the bike task force that didn't require.
it was because it was under the we keep
Yeah,
saying that. It
count
was under
plan.
the comprehensive plan, which was
Just giving
yeah,
an example.
Piece and some-
which was $40,000 from the county. We got from. Maybe we should have kept that. Okay, so is that the decision that we'll send out the application on the website? They'll apply. I'll look at it. Obviously, I'll talk to all of you guys, and then we'll give advice and we'll vote on it on the task force. The members, right? There's 6 of you. Okay with that?
Two.
Can you repeat? I'm sorry. Could you repeat what was proposed?
Are you okay with that?
We'll prepare an application and
Yeah.
have it available on a website.
That's what I said.
Village
And then
website
we'll
or
let
something.
people apply, and we'll then, as a group, I'll talk to all of you, but I will pick whatever names you think is right, and we'll ratify it. It's not going to be that complicated, I don't think. And then we'll just have to. Patty, you're going to lead it, or somebody's got to lead it to say, okay, now we're going to meet.
Do a resolution.
I just want to make sure that we walk away and nothing gets done. I don't want people to be disappointed.
So we would, after you speak with Greg,
Yeah.
we would write up a resolution, some sort of document
Yeah.
memorializing.
We're
everything,
memorializing
and
all
then
this,
you'll,
right.
you can, I think
We'll
we
vote
can-
on it
at the next
in
meeting.
January,
Yep.
right? I'm confident that you're taking good notes, so I'm just trying to get through this.
And record it on YouTube.
And record it on Facebook. All right.
Not actually, it's not.
It's not live?
No, it's just YouTube. Sorry.
It is live.
On YouTube.
And our website.
And our website. Okay. All right. All right. Are you all satisfied with that then, from a discussion standpoint? I'm
You know, the
looking at
next
you because you're going to
steps?
lead it.
So we'll get I can't even speak anymore. It's so late. The sample applications from the Cornell University, and also contact Tim to see if he has a sample application. You might have it too because you were on that committee,
Yeah, but
Rez.
the problem is it was online, so D200 has it.
Maybe for
Well, we can-
simplicity,
But we can get something.
Can we stick to the Cornell study?
We know someone
Yeah.
over there.
Okay.
All right. So Trustee Hennick has talked about not recreating the wheel, which I love that. So maybe we could just take that application. If everyone's okay, let's take that application.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we need timetables, deliverables. Because we want to be, if we are prepared to do a IGA with the forest preserves and IDNR, we need enough runway to get that done.
So I think I agree with Rez's point is we have to have a drop dead date.
Yeah.
On this. So if you want to start with a date where it has to be done
Yeah.
and work backwards.
Right.
Yep, so that's what I'm asking. Okay, good, another way of saying it. But I think if we're at all interested in, if it comes back saying we should be doing culling, then we should be prepared to be
Right.
doing culling.
Well,
And-
according to the application for the from the IDNR, they need at least 30 days
Okay.
to give approval And then
Okay.
they typically start the calling in December through the end of March.
Right.
Okay.
And so when they do those observations or those counts or those whatever they do.
I don't know when.
Okay, that's the key.
Right.
Right.
And so we don't get into a situation as was,
Right.
you know, that we're doing this in the snow.
Right.
Can we, you know, put a September 30th date on this thing?
I was
so
going
that-
to say September.
So that gives
That's
them,
that's a drop dead. I would.
yeah, so
Right.
that gives them still the fall to be in there looking at stuff
Sure.
that they
Right.
as part of the application
Sure.
process.
Sounds. I mean, that gives us enough time.
I think that sounds fair. I think we also should probably just ask them when they like to go. So if they like to go in,
The level of confidence in any truth that I feel like I'm going to get out of the Forest Preserve District right now is 0.
All right, September then. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Just before lemonade.
Okay. How about we say August
That's not
30th?
gonna be-
That's definitely
Yeah, you
September
said
30th.
September 30th.
Oh, September 30th.
No, he
right.
said September 30th. I'm saying September before.
Oh.
Oh, it's all behind you by then.
So you wanted August?
September 30th.
All right.
Is fine.
All right, we got through that.
Okay.
Okay, that should really clear out the room.
Unless you're asleep in your seats.
Right. We
All
have
right,
another
and then
vote. We
last
have the
thing
shared
is the
vote.
ordinance.
Move to approve an ordinance establishing the River Forest Special Service Area Number 11.
Second.
Take the vote.
Don't forget that that's
Trustee Vasquez.
Yes.
Trustee Brennan.
Yes.
Trustee Hennick.
Yes.
Trustee O'Connell.
Yes.
Trustee Bachner.
yes.
Trustee Kargi.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Alrighty. Do we have executive session?
No, ma'am.
Oh.
God. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Otherwise, it